COVID-19 transmission at public meetings. Ordinarily, the Brown Act sets strict rules for teleconferencing. The governor's executive order has suspended those rules. The executive order does require that we continue to notice meetings in advance. The city has met all of the applicable noticing requirements. Members of the public may offer public comment by email to planning@cupertino.org prior to the close of the public comment period for each agenda item. The executive order does require that we continue to notice meetings, each agenda item. Staff will share all such comments with the commission and make them part of the record. So we move on to item 1, approval of the minutes. Subject, draft minutes of the July 28th, 2020 meeting. Recommended action, approve or modify the draft minutes of the July 28th, 2020 meeting. So please take a moment to make sure you've looked at them. I move that we approve the minutes of the July 28th, 2020 meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Actually, I had one comment. I wasn't present, but I believe that the minutes said that that was a special meeting, and I think that was actually a regular meeting.
It was a regular meeting.
It was a regular meeting. I did change it.
Oh, maybe, yeah, did you update it on the website? I pulled this one when it was
okay, I'll make sure that it's posted regular meeting. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have a vote. Okay, excuse me, Vice Chair Wang?
Approved.
Yay.
Commissioner Takahashi?
Yay.
Commissioner Fung?
I abstained due to absence.
Chair Moore?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved 302 with Saxena and Fung abstaining and absent.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, we move on to presentations. Item 2, subject, receive the email phishing campaign presentation from Chief Technology Officer Bill Mitchell. Recommended action, receive the presentation and provide any input to staff. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Chair Moore and Commissioners. It's my pleasure tonight to talk to you about a very timely but very important conversation as well. Tonight we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, and if you allow, I'm going to share my screen with you for a presentation. You see my PowerPoint? Okay, awesome. So tonight what we're going to be talking about is cybersecurity, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the cyber threat landscape, specifically ransomware, what the city is doing for defensive measures, and then finally I'll finish up with some questions. Of course, this is interactive, so if you have any questions throughout there, just raise your hand and I'll be glad to call on you. So the city on a daily basis constantly is under threat from hackers and outside entities that are looking to either steal or disrupt operations. And we have a multitude of ways that we are being pummeled. Here's a few. I'll talk to these a little bit, but I'm going to concentrate on malware and phishing. So there's many attack vectors. One is man in the middle, denial of service, SQL injection, zero-day exploit, malware, and phishing. So malware is just malicious code. So it's software that has been written for the intent to either disrupt services or to steal something from you. But there needs to be a mechanism, a vehicle to deliver that. And that vehicle today, for the most part, is phishing. And phishing is an email that looks legit, but it prompts you to try to either download an attachment, which will have malicious software in there, or it'll take you to a link with that type of information. So that's ransomware. And ransomware, what happens there is, get the malicious code, what it does is it goes in, encrypts all the files, puts a lock on them, and then you'll get a little message from a hacker saying, we'll be glad to decrypt and give these back to you if you pay us X amount of Bitcoin. And it's always an electronic Bitcoin, because then it's very difficult to find who the perpetrator is. So what would a PowerPoint presentation be without statistics? So here you go. 2020, this is what the landscape looks like for today. And you can see by far the US is the #1 target. Well, what about governments within that space? So manufacturing is #1, governments are #2. So if you remember, I told you that malware tries to do two things. It either tries to disrupt services or it tries to steal from you. Manufacturing is perfect for disrupting services. What they want to do there is kill the supply chain and those kind of items. For us, we're a very soft target. What I mean by that is because of our public entity and our transparency, we offer up information. If people want to know information about us, just ask us. We're more than happy to tell you. We'll tell you who the CEO is, who the CFO is, who the CIO is. We'll tell you every name in the organization. We'll tell you every vendor. So it makes it very soft and easy target for people to hit. Here's some successful hits over the last, this is since January of 2020. So Las Vegas was pretty good. They had some cyber software that was able to stop the intrusion with very minimal damage. The other one of these, not so lucky. All of those had either a ransom to pay or they're continuing in negotiations. So the last two, Knoxville, Tennessee, still in negotiations. They came out publicly and said, don't worry, there was no confidential information stolen. The hackers the next day published confidential information that was stolen. So, you know, this is a very bad thing. And governments don't like to make the front page for these kind of things. And then UCSF, they were very quick. They were hit with ransomware. They negotiated a $1.14 million ransom. They paid it and moved on. So let's talk about what our defenses are. So in the left-hand corner here, you can see IT with its hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cyber gear and equipment and appliances and software. But then we have Dave over here in the right-hand corner, and Dave only has to click on the wrong thing. That's it. And this, in the ransomware and the malicious code, could be hit. We try the best we can through our technologies, but we still have to deal with Dave. So what do we do there? So for us, it's training and notification. So unfortunately, we pummel you with phishing campaigns and tell you that here's a COVID announcement from HR at Cupertino.org, and people click on that. But there's a caution banner on that that says, hey, this is coming from outside the organization. Any email from staff will not have that caution banner. But there's a caveat. We do outsource services. So for example, Zoom is an outsourced service we do for video conferencing. When you get the email about a Zoom meeting, you're going to have that caution banner. So you have to be very vigilant when you're looking at these things to verify, you know, is that a legit from address? And is a link pointing me to where they say they're pointing me? So with COVID-19, you're seeing a 300 to 400% rise in ransomware attacks. And that's because, again, it's an easy thing to do. People are at home. People are concerned. We're a curious being. So if you're giving me the latest information on COVID, I'm going to open it. Well, let's not. Let's wait. Let's make sure you know what you're looking for. And then from time to time, you may get a know before training. Some of that is legit, meaning that this is introductory class or an ongoing class that we have. And sometimes it's remedial training. So if it says that you're in remedial training, what that means, and that's an indication of, is you have clicked on a link you should not have. So IT gets a weekly report on where we are with the phishing attacks. We know, who should be going through remedial training, and from time to time, we'll give you a friendly reminder, hey, by the way, this is mandatory. You need to keep up with this training. And we talked about the caution banner a little bit. There's your first indication right there to be vigilant. So where do we stand? So the graph on the left here is our 6-month campaigns. And the information to the right looks promising, doesn't it? It says that in the industry, staff's about 30% prone to phishing attacks. That means they're going to click on malicious code. For us, we're at 3.8%, which sounds really, really good, except all I need is one Dave to click. That's all I need is one person. So we have to be at 0% and stay at 0%. So IT will continue these phishing campaigns. So when you see those emails from hr.cupertino.org, or that you got a speeding ticket, or, we send out a whole rash of different ones. Normally those are from my staff. We're just testing. What we're trying to do is to make you as comfortable with looking at these things, identifying this as a fish, and dropping it, right? I've been asked, why don't you give us a warning? Well, someone breaking into your house doesn't give you a warning. They just do it. So that's the way this is as well. So here's the things there's good news and bad news about this data to the side. So there is no orange, which is data entered. When we started this campaign over a year ago, we used to have people that would enter in their credentials. We had a person that entered in their social security information. Don't ever do that. IT will never ask you for your credentials. They'll just change your credentials. That's it. Never give out social security numbers. Our HR folks will not ask you via email, what's your HR? What is your social security number? So where can we improve on? We do open attachments. So in these blue areas, you see that we open attachments from time to time. So if you see something like this, the best and most prudent thing to do, if you have a concern, is send it to helpdesk@cupertino.org. The IT staff there will review the email. If it's phished, they'll let you know that. If it's not, they'll give it back to you and say, hey, this is safe, this is legit, go ahead and move forward with this. So what's your job? Your job is to be that cyber hero. Don't let any ransomware hit us. We don't need it. We try to stay out of the news as much as possible as far as on the IT perspective. So let's be that cyber hero. I'm going to leave you with a quote from the great Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And what he was saying there is, what you really need to do is just train. Be in that ring all the time, training. He doesn't go in with a plan. His whole idea is to deflect what people are coming his way, and then he's going to hit them. So we don't hit people, we're pacifists, but we don't want to be hit either. We don't want to get punched in the mouth. So with that, I open it up. Any questions that you may have, I'm more than willing to see what we can do.
All right. Thank you, Bill. That's great. Great presentation. Commissioners, do we have any questions on this?
When's the last time the city actually had something go wrong because of cybersecurity?
So we haven't had anything from a phishing attack go wrong, but they're, like I said, we're constantly intact. So there's another one called the brute force attack, which is where people try to guess your passwords and your credentials. So this is why you have to change your passwords every 90 days and why the length is 8 and you have to use special characters. But even with all that, we've had one successful brute force attack in the whole time I've been here. So it's something to be leery of. We were able to see that right away, eliminate the person's credentials, and then reestablish that. And we were able to track where the folks were able to go, and they didn't get too far. So we were pretty good.
Thank you. And does Microsoft, our cloud provider, also provide some tools to help them? Because they must be processing like millions of emails and everything.
Yeah, so we use a plethora of tools out there. Unfortunately, just due to security reasons, we don't say what the tools are, but Microsoft are some of the tools that we utilize in our cybersecurity defense.
So we do. Oh, Vice Chair.
Okay. Hi, Bill. Thank you for sharing with that. We've seen a lot of rise of, DDoS attacks, DNI attacks, DDI down the bat. It's been pretty bad. So I'm glad you're doing something about it. And are you speaking to every commission about this or just this one?
No, I've spoke to almost all the commissions at this time. You're one of the last ones.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you. What are we doing about insider threats? We've seen that happen in the Valley. About June, we had communique from our clients, from some of our contacts and our clients that a number of insider threats have occurred. Other things that are being done to prevent that as well, because it's usually the human is the worst part of the chain. So
within us, we have a very active program for, well, first of all, we vet employees before they come in the door. Second is, once they're in the door, we only give them access rights to what they need to see. People with administrative rights only belong to my group. That's it. And it's a very small amount of people that have those kind of rights. We do periodically spot check just to make sure that there are no issues. Every year we have an annual audit that comes out, and what they'll do is, for example, a big test that we go through is when employees leave, how quickly do we disable their access to all the different things. So we've been very good at that. We had an issue a few years back, but we're getting better and better at being able to solve that issue. But yeah, on the finance side, what we do is on the credentialing and just limit who can have it. But finance also does a very good job of separation of duties. So for example, the person that cuts the check isn't the person that creates the check, so they do those kind of things as well. So I think we have a pretty robust solution for inside, hacking.
thank you.
Okay. Bill, I think I might have brought this up at the Housing Commission meeting, but we receive emails from outside quite often. And what's your advice on that for
So
residents? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would do, Kitty, if it's just text email that's coming to you, and it could be from a resident, right? Is if it's just text, it's not going to be an issue. But if they're pointing you to a link, or they want you to download an attachment, be safe, right? What you can do is if you can do your own forensics and look at the link and say, okay, they're sending me to this link and that's where I should be going, I'm good, and I can verify who it's from, great. But if you have a question, that help desk at Cupertino.org is the way to go. So one of the commissioners asked me, he goes, well, we don't want to be sending you all these emails. Believe me, my team would rather get those emails than have a ransomware hit. So so that's the best way.
Okay. Thank you. We happen to have one of our attachments with I think about 8 different links associated with it and PDFs. So that's good advice. So are we going to see if there are any questions from the public? I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time. Okay. Madam Clerk, did we have any written communications on this item?
No, we've not received anything in our mailbox.
Okay. Okay. So any further questions or comments from the commission? Oh, all right. Great. Thank you, Bill. That concludes item 2. We move on to oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter within the jurisdiction of the commission and not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. In most cases, state law will prohibit the commission from making any decisions with respect to a matter not on the agenda. And I see there is a hand raised. Get situated. Okay. And see, it's Jennifer. Jennifer, are you there?
Yes, I hope you can hear me okay. I had trouble with my tablet. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfectly, yes. Okay, thank you.
Good, okay. And of course, Kitty, my cat decided to start meowing. She thinks dinner time. Anyway, I just wanted to, again, let me just say that Bill did a great job. It's the 3rd time I've seen his presentation, and it's a very And I think it's always good to make sure that everybody's very, very careful when they're getting information in their. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin, and I was just very, very concerned about the big housing bills, especially the big six by Tony Adkins. And I'm really, really concerned because we have a very, very short legislative session and a lot of things kind of wrapping up, concluding. I am very concerned about the funding source of the housing bills. There's evidence that money is coming in from Portland, Washington State, that is winding up backing some of these housing bills. And I really am quite confounded about what we do about things like that. Should there be a discussion about if funding is coming in from outside the state, how does that affect bills that are proposed by our state legislature? I feel in some ways that compromises our ability as private citizens in California to determine our legislative future and what bills we want. I think the housing bills to be detrimental to property owners, homeowners. It's a direct assault on the urban neighborhoods, local control, and the smaller cities. So I think we need to have a discussion about that, and I hope the governor sees fit to not sign these bills. I'm hoping with the selection of Kamala that governor will look toward DC and not look toward the housing bills. He needs to move on. We want him to be president. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Looking to see if there are any other participants who wish to speak. And seeing none, Madam Clerk, did we have any written oral communications? Written communications for the oral communications portion.
No, I haven't seen anything in the mailbox. I do have a request from the video team. If Commissioner Saxena could adjust his camera a little bit. We're getting the top of your head cut off.
All right. Okay, so we move on to written communications, which we have received, and consent calendar. We have nothing on consent calendar, and then we move to public hearings. Item 3, subject, municipal code amendments to adopt glazing and lighting regulations to implement the fiscal year 2019-2020 City Council work program items related to dark sky and bird safe design. Application number MCA 2019-003 and MCA 2019-004, applicant City of Cupertino, location citywide. Recommendation is to conduct the public hearing and recommend that the City Council, 1, find that the action is exempt from CEQA, and 2, amend the municipal code by adding a new chapter 19.102 and amending chapters 19.08, 19.12, 19.40, 19.60, and 19.72 to adopt glazing and lighting regulations to implement bird safe design and dark sky goals. Tentative City Council hearing date is September 15th, 2020, and we begin with the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Moore. We have a couple staff here today to present these items for you. Because these two items are somewhat related and have some overlapping code, muni code sections, we decided to kind of merge them into one for easy reference. We have Ellen Yao, which will be discussing on the bird safe item, and we have Eric Serrano, who will be talking about the dark sky. We also have the Deputy City Attorney, Sarah Clark, here with us, as well as our planning manager, Pew Ghosh, on standby. So with that, I'll hand it off to our experts here, Ellen and Eric. Take it away. Thank you.
All right. So thanks, Ben. So we'll be discussing the bird safe and dark sky, be Ellen and myself. So we kind of broke up the presentation a little bit. So we're going to give a brief background and go into detail with the bird safe regulation, pause for any kind of quick questions you may have or discussion, and then transition to the dark sky and closing it out. Just kind of want to give you a brief overview of it. So if Ellen, could you go to the next slide? So this item is part of the 2019-20 work program. So the city doesn't have necessarily bird safe or dark sky standards. Projects that aren't exempt from CEQA are required to address bird strikes as part of the environmental review. Part of the basis for adoption is that there's a lot of consistency with the general plan in protecting environmental resources and promoting high quality design. Next slide. So the dark sky, so a little bit of background about dark sky. So light pollution and dark sky movement kind of go hand in hand. So you see a big push for the dark sky movement in the 1970s. We see a lot of encroachment to light pollution. Our current regulations have limits in commercial and parking areas. So we have regulations for parking lots, sidewalks, and other areas accessible to pedestrians and automobiles. We do limit the exterior lighting color to white type, try to minimize glare and promote adequate intensity to the particular area. In the hillside area, we do kind of hope or work for the lights to meet a particular need. We also prevent any motion activated lights exceeding 100 watts and making sure those are shielded to prevent any glare. The code is silent on many other areas, so residential and mixed use as residential, there's not a lot in there about that. And so that's going to conclude the background for the dark sky and then transition over to Ellen.
Hi, good evening. So for bird safe design, there has been a lot of discussion on how we are developing our buildings and how that's affecting the natural environment. So studies have reported that more than 100 million birds are killed every year due to bird collisions, which are called bird strikes. And
Ellen, your slideshow is a little bit off. You can adjust it. There you go, perfect. Thank you.
Is it clear now?
Yeah, it's clear. If you want, well, you may share your screen again.
Yeah.
There you go. Looks good.
There you go. Thank you. Okay, so the issue with bird strikes, they occur commonly when there is exposed, reflective, or transparent glass. And so in our urban and suburban environment, a lot of birds see the reflection of sky and the landscaping that we have. And they don't perceive that it's a solid barrier. And in addition to that, when we have glazing glass and then we have interior lighting inside of our buildings, they assume that's something that they can fly through. And so due to that, we've seen building design trends and bird strikes kind of commingle. And due to that, there's a reduction in bird populations, and research has shown there's a significant loss. So many cities have implemented policies and ordinances. Some of them have codified it, some of them have used it as just general policy. And different organizations like architects and stuff, they have addressed bird safe design, as well as our California CEQA environmental impact review. So larger projects are also required to address bird strikes. Some of the cities that have implemented bird safe design include San Francisco, Toronto, Oakland, Alameda, Santa Cruz, and locally Sunnyvale. So back in October of last year, Eric and I brought to Planning Commission a study session going through some of the potential areas of regulation that we can go to our community members and see if they have comments. And the feedback given by Planning Commission, we incorporated into our draft, and as well as 2 outreach meetings that we have at the beginning of this year in February. Those comments that we had during our discussion and breakout session, we also incorporated into the draft. We also received some comments through email and phone calls, which we've also considered. So I'm going to go into specifically bird safe regulation and what we've included into our draft ordinance. Overall, we would like to apply the bird safe proposals to any new or remodeled primary or accessory buildings. Any replacement of glass windows and glass features things like balconies or just solid glass walls, freestanding walls, would require anyone who's seeking a building permit for any of those above projects or require a development permit with the planning division. Within that category, we want to require this citywide. We believe that since most of bird strikes happen at the lower levels and at ground, so usually 0 up to 50 feet, this is where mostly birds, including local songbirds, are likely for them to fly into the glazed facades. Like I mentioned before, these lower areas is where there's reflection of the sky and the landscaping. Therefore, those are the most hazardous locations. But we understand that from community members, some of them have concerns about applying it to their development as well. And so staff has also proposed 2 additional options that I'm going to go over. I want to just specify that our draft ordinance right now is the most stringent and it's applied citywide. So 2 of the other options, we have option A to the left and option B to the right. Option A is more moderate, option B is least restrictive. And this is in comparison to other cities as well. Right now in option A that we've included here is we would exclude most single-story structures except for the ones that are in bird-sensitive areas. And we've highlighted some of those bird-sensitive areas. They would be in or within 300 feet of the wildland-urban interface. That's mostly in the hillside. Any water courseways and large properties with open spaces. And again, this is to combat those hazardous locations where birds are more likely to see a reflection of landscaping. I do want to highlight our draft ordinance is the most stringent because we do have rather large residential properties and we do encourage a lot of natural landscapes. And so that's what our draft ordinance kind of covers. In option B, which is the least restrictive, we exclude all structures under 35 feet. This would exclude single-family homes. Our max height for single-family homes is 28 feet. Most duplexes, triplexes, and even smaller office and commercial buildings. Some of the standards that are included in the bird safe regulation specifically is related to glass. So the proposed ordinance right now would require windows to be made more visible, which means you'd have to apply either, and I'll go over some of those later, muttons or window treatments to windows that are 12 square feet or more. For facades, we can limit it up to 10% of the facade that does not have to be treated. So if you take a look at the image that I have on the right here, this is at Swarthmore College, I believe, and they have essentially a wall of glass, and they have certain areas, patches of it being treated, and then some of the lower glass on the ground, they've broken it up with actual barriers or mullions. So in the draft ordinance, we have a standard compliance treatment, which are things like muttons. So you can look to the left, kind of a standard single-family home will have glass that's broken up by the white lines in the glass frame. Those are muttons. They could do something like fritting, which would go back. You can see on the top left image the little dots. It's kind of like fritting, and the bottom left as well. So it's etching inside the glass. The main intent of bird safe design is to make the glazing visible to birds. We've also included alternative compliance method. So in certain cases, if a project feels like they want to address it in a different way, similar to other cities, they can provide a report that is written by a qualified biologist, and staff would review it and would have to be approved by the director. That's for certain cases. Second, for bird safe standards would be lighting. So I just talked about glazing and glass. Now talking about lighting. bird safe regulations for lighting generally covers indoor and outdoor lighting. As Ben previously mentioned, exterior lighting is kind of covered in dark sky, so we've incorporated that into the dark sky regulations, which Eric will be going over in a little bit. For indoor lighting, we have two requirements. Projects that are applicable to bird safe are required to program lighting to turn off by 11 p.m. or 2 hours after close of the business. And this is just for the lighting that's visible to the outside. So if you have an interior room with lighting there, that wouldn't be required to do that. Or it could be filtered with the use of blinds. Again, this is how do we create the perception so birds are aware that this is a building. You see light, we have things that are filtering out the light so it doesn't create that hazard condition for them. And then we have general site planning and building design. We want to avoid the funneling of flight paths toward building facades. We want to avoid use of highly reflective glass or highly transparent glass. And then avoid glass features such as transparent building corners. We've included some bird safe exemptions. This is typical in other cities, and we've kind of talked about it during our study session as well. We would exempt historic structures from bird safe design and first floor commercial storefronts up to a height of 15 feet. Everything above 15 feet, even if you're a commercial storefront, would be required to apply bird safe regulations. So that concludes the bird safe portion. If you have any questions, we can answer those for now. Again, some of the lighting regulations will be covered in the dark sky portion.
Commissioner Moore, may I go? Chair Moore? Okay, I'll go first, okay?
Yes, Commissioner Saxena.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Ellen. I had a question about, the various techniques used to make birds aware. Are there standardized architectural standards for those, in the sense that, there is like standard materials available which comply with those standards, which a contractor or builder can use? Because the concern I had was that how much of an extra financial overhead this compliance would add to anybody building in the city. And if you could give a general overview of, what that landscape looks like in terms of, availability of materials and cost and so on.
Yeah, I think I can go over some of the materials, specifically the cost. It would depend. In terms of the solutions for glass, standard things could be just your regular buttons, and that would be the image that I showed before of a single family home that has a window and it has the lines right in the glass. So those are pretty standard for residential properties. For larger office buildings, architects would apply what we called fritting, and that's just an application that they have on the in between the glass so that it kind of breaks it up and you can see it's kind of opaque. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, so that's pretty standard, and typically you would see that for bird safe buildings. You may also have architects who apply kind of an exterior permanent structure, so they'll have shielding. So even though you have glass in the front, you'd have like a metal screen, and it's kind of artistic, and that creates that barrier from the glass, and so the birds are able to perceive that barrier.
Okay. So it's something which people are doing typically as a part of the normal design process, and it should not put any extra burden on anybody who's building new in Cupertino beyond, of course it'll be a bit extra, but it's typically considered normal part of business in this part of the world, yes.
I think in Cupertino, because we don't have those regulations right now, people may not be entirely familiar with it, but it's indicated in our, in general EIR process. We have, they do consider bird strikes as an impact. And so generally people would be aware of what solutions are in place.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question, Ellen, on the muntins. Are those what are typically called divided light windows also?
Correct, yes.
And does that count as a feature that would, satisfy the requirement?
Yes.
Okay, so, but on the other hand, it's a pretty traditional window style. So I'm just thinking in terms of, my Eichler home doesn't have any Muntin windows, but it's more of a classic traditional style. And then I was looking at the table that you have, the comparison table, and at some point I'd like to know, and this can go later on, but I'd like to know kind of where we fit in with the neighboring cities. I don't see us on the table. So if there's some further questions from the other commissioners, we'll go there and then we'll get back to this, I think.
Okay.
Are there further questions?
Sure, I have one. Are there size maximum or minimum sizes where treatment would not be required in an addition or new construction?
Yeah, so right now, the way the draft ordinance is written is the windows that would be applicable to the glazing treatment would be anything that's 12 square feet or larger.
Thanks.
Okay. Vice Chair, did you have any questions?
My questions were just really like when we have these types of proposals in general and regulations like this, how do we have a process for a cost benefit analysis to say what's the additional impact from a cost per home or additional impact of regulatory burden for any of the residents or construction folks, whether it's, resident or commercial? Because it seems like we never get any of those. And I was just wondering if is that just something that's not a standard process that we have? And then in this case, just back to Vikram's, Commissioner Saxena's question, I mean, in terms of glass, from what I remember, a bird safe glass is anywhere between 5 to 7% more expensive, in terms of construction, so.
So, Vice Chair Wayne, I think what we're trying to say here in this particular case is sort of value the nature and also, birds part of that nature. And sort of have that balance of how much more costly would it be to protect our environment, right? What we're hearing from the industry is that, of course, there's always an extra cost. Windows could have a UV treatment, you could have a fitted glass, you could have a film placed on the windows. But those are sort of I don't want to consider minor, but they're fairly minor cost balance to sort of protect our environments. And that's what's being considered here for this particular item.
Just asking, do we normally do cost benefit analysis, not on the specific item? Because if it, even take 5%, average home has about $65,000 worth of glass, and we're talking about you're adding extra $1,000. I mean, I do understand that. So.
Yeah, I think I was coming from more like, are we going to be starting demands for concessions and density bonuses because we have to have this bird safe thing? And because that's sort of fresh in my mind, the debates you've had about builders or developers asking for density bonuses. And I wanted to get a sense of in the scale, like where does it truly belong? Is it like, if your windows would have cost $50,000, it becomes $60,000, or is it if $50,000 becomes $500,000? Like that was the kind of sort of number I was looking for.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have that number for you tonight. I mean, it kind of depends on what the applicant want to provide, depending on the development. There's not really a straight up sort of 50 versus 60 versus 75. There's a variety of different options. And that's why we don't have that sort of configurative and attached for consideration tonight. But if that's something the commission, will prefer to see before making a decision, we can certainly, contact our industry experts that we've been talking to and get that rough estimate on what they are. But like I said, it depends on development, right? And depends on what kind of development that's being proposed. There's a variety of different resources that could be available to provide a bird safe facade.
I have a question for Ellen, and it's just, or for Ben. Yes? So we have the, we have the resolution as written, which would cover all structures at any height. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then they would have to do, so if you had a 12-story high building, every floor, and the windows were greater than 12 square feet, every window on all 12 stories would need to have it would need to meet this requirement, either the muntins or some fritting or something that an outside consultant came up with. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right, so that's, that's
That's our draft ordinance.
Okay, so option one, and then we have an alternative, exclude most single-story development, and then another one, exclude all structures under 35 feet, and then you're saying that the bird strikes happen from 0 to 50. So if we excluded, I just want to understand the alternatives. If we exclude 35 feet, then we're really just covering between 35 and 50 because that's where the bird strikes are mostly happening. But we still would be requiring everything from 50 to say, 150 to have the fritting. Okay, so I understand that part. Okay, and then alternatively, we can come up with our own hybrid, it looked like.
Absolutely. I want to clarify the option A, I didn't specify, but the way the option is written is 20 feet. So it's 20 feet for option A and then 35 feet for option B, which option A would preclude a lot of the single story homes. And yes, any other hybrid of that combination. And to go over the matrix, so Cupertino obviously isn't included in there because we don't have that, but in comparison, to that, we are definitely more conservative. We've gotten comments from residents that support it being citywide, so that's why it was written that way, and we think that would address the issue the best. And we included the options just because we do have other people who've made comments that they rather not, and so we've included in there. So based off the matrix, we're most conservative. We're probably by Santa Cruz and Alameda right now. But Santa Cruz doesn't have it codified, but they do have it as policy, and so it's kind of a handout that they give out to all their developers. So in essence, it's applicable to their projects. Alameda's is codified.
Okay.
Just to clarity on that, in terms of Santa Cruz, it is required, or as far as being codified or not codified, or it's recommended guideline?
They're listed as guidelines, but they're design standards. So they're applicable to specific buildings that are within a certain zoning designation.
Okay.
So just, sorry.
Mr. Takahashi, please. Go
Yeah, just in terms of hybrid, I would recommend we discuss whether or not additions, remodels be included or not, because now you're going to require essentially a different look and feel of the glass versus the rest of the household if you're adding one room, for example. And seems to me that might be give a applicant a little bit of angst in terms of architectural consistency for the house itself. So just throwing it out there as some food for thought.
Ellen, could you clarify that? So if you had a structure that was below 20 feet and you added on, and it was...
Well, as it's written in the most stringent way, then that addition would require that the glass be treated, right? But if it's a one-room addition and you have all these other windows that aren't treated, you've created an inconsistency in the look and feel of that house. And architecturally, I think that's an inconsistency. Or are we saying, no, also by remodeling this household, you have to change out all your windows, which is now a prohibitive cost to performing an addition. And then ADUs, how do ADUs fit in? So this is a can of worms, if you ask me, and there's a lot of unintended consequences that can come out of this, and I think we need to think about those as best we can.
Okay, Ellen, could you clarify that for the existing resolution? Is Commissioner Takahashi's take on that correct?
Yes, he is correct. Right now, it is the most stringent and includes all single-family homes, and it would include additions as well. It could be noted that we have the applicability section, and I've given our draft ordinance in two options. You can also consider exemptions as well. So if you wanted to exempt, let's say, an ADU or an addition up to a certain size, if the windows are no more than 25% of a facade, something like that. So that could be another consideration in terms of modifying the draft ordinance.
So you're not requiring that the rest of the house be brought up to the standard if you add on? Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, thank you.
So what was the answer to that? That was actually, I think, the primary question.
Oh, no, you would only be required to apply bird-safe treatment to the new addition. We wouldn't require property owners to also change the rest of the.
I had a couple comments as well. I think I had a note, I was going to save it for later, but my note was really, although I don't think it was required for this hearing, I actually think that having an example cost, if you use a prototypical home or a prototypical, I would say, prototypical store, kind of a commercial design, it would be great to see an example of what kind of cost you would be looking at here. I think just so that people get a sense, whether it is a small amount or a large amount. And I would also share, I'd also noted the concern about architectural continuity. If somebody had a house that had, that had large picture windows today, and then had brought, had it not been for this law, had brought something where, well, now I'm going to have completely different window look. I'm not sure that would have been approved before. Commissioner Moore also mentioned the fact that she lives in a architectural restricted area. I'm not sure whether, I believe that that's probably being treated as the historical exemption here, but that would be another example of, it would not be possible to build, to have an Eichler with divided windows, I think, and be compliant with the regulations around the maintaining appearance.
Yeah, in regards to Chair Moore's home and other Eichlers, they would not count as historic structures based off of our draft ordinance, but there are solutions, and the way the draft ordinance is written is we have a standard compliance option, and staff will be developing kind of a handout to kind of clarify what those specific treatments are. But we do have, there are solutions such as putting those interior dots that are semi-permanent for things like that. So we could consider that as a solution for residential homes as well. So when we have that implemented, that could create that visual barrier. So you still maintain the architectural form, but you have additional treatment on the glazing.
But as it's written right now, if I were to add on an ADU, I would only have to treat the new glass if I was going to maintain the same look and not add muntins or something like that. So right. the rest of the structure is all going to stay the same.
Right. But like it was stated in the study session, we would want to encourage property owners to also do it as well, but they wouldn't be required to because it could be quite a process to change out all of your additional windows if you're just doing an addition.
Okay, and I believe I did understand that you could have window coverings, and that also counts?
So if you have exterior screenings, that could be an option as well.
Okay, but one of the things that I actually do, because I have the clear story windows, the 8 to 10 feet tall glass floor to ceiling, is I have drapes, and even with the drapes drawn, I will have bird strikes, and I'm going to assume that has to do with the reflection.
Very possibly, yeah. Yeah, for this ordinance purpose, we're trying to find more permanent solutions versus drapes because they may never be drawn, and you'd have large windows that aren't actually serving the purpose of this ordinance and the intent of saving birds.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wanted to say, look, I know a lot of work has gone into this, a lot of options. I think we're all arguing here, we're asking questions about the most stringent option that's been placed there. I just wanted to make sure we know what choices and parameters we can kind of set. For example, is it okay to limit this to certain types of zoning? Is it okay to limit this to, and I saw the option to limit it to certain size of height. Is it okay to grandfather certain types of developments or property? Is it okay to limit it to, new additions or to only new construction? I just want to make sure that we all know that those are options that within our purview. So I just want to make sure that there's nothing that's not there as well in terms of options.
I'd also want to reiterate how much outreach we had, especially if we're going to be affecting commercial owners and some of our larger new developments that are coming in. I saw that there were 32 attendees in February. I was one of them. And did you get feedback from commercial property owners who would be affected by this? Anything like that?
For our public meetings, we sent out a postcard and went citywide to all residents. We didn't have anyone who specified that they were a commercial owner, so it's uncertain. But we did receive comments from, I believe, residents.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question probably for our Deputy City Attorney. Would you like to go to public comments and questions on this item, or are we going to go through the light section next and then we're going to move to the public?
Yeah, the way that this has been agendized is the one item. So my recommendation would be to, if there are no more clarifying questions from the commission, to move on to the dark skies portion of the ordinance and to hear public comment at the end.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on to dark skies unless there are any further questions on the bird safe portion. Okay, no further questions. Will we please have the presentation on dark skies?
Yes. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay? Perfect. All right. Slideshow. So let's start with applicability. So for applicability, all outdoor lighting must comply with the proposed ordinance. When a building permit is received for a new structure, an electrical permit for outdoor lighting or signage, as part of a new development project or new and replacement lighting. For submission requirements, we've asked for several things, including a site plan with outdoor lighting fixtures, a description of each lighting fixture, so something, a spec sheet, cut sheet, something like that, shows what that lighting is. Photometric plans, which may be waived by the Director of Community Development if deemed unnecessary. And we also have a requirement to deem some of these items in the project or in the ordinance if it's deemed unnecessary. So we're thinking more towards single family residences, duplex, triplexes, where we can see by the proposed lighting that's meeting certain requirements like shielded, pointing downward, certain height, that would meet the intent of the overall ordinance. So in terms of the regulations, so outdoor lighting would be fully shielded, directed downward towards the need and away from any adjacent properties and right away. There is an exception in place for low voltage landscape lighting, special architectural features, and public art, which would be reviewed at a project level. So if new projects coming in and they're proposing like a gateway feature or something that would be architecturally significant with appropriate lighting, we would look at that. We also have an exception built in for historic lighting fixtures. So illumination levels. So no lights can cast light exceeding 1 foot candle to an adjacent property. So 1 foot candle, think candle, 1 foot, that kind of brightness. No direct offsite glare from a light source shall be visible above 3 feet of a public right of way. So don't see the light bulb. The maximum light intensity shall not exceed and maintain 10-foot candles when measured at finished grade. So 10 candles brightness. In terms of color, color is not to exceed 3,000 kelvins, kind of a yellowish going towards white, but still yellow. And we also are looking for night hours. So outdoor lighting to be extinguished by 11 p.m. or when people are no longer present in exterior areas. So as part of the regulations, we are asking for automated control systems. So this would be used for all outdoor lighting when sufficient daylight is available. They would extinguish when sufficient daylight is available and extinguish within 10 minutes of activation. All these would be required to have battery backup. This is kind of similar in a weird way to our irrigation systems. They work very similarly, except for with water. This is light. Lighting design standards. So lighting fixtures must be a design that complements the building and landscaping and scalable to that particular use. So security lighting. So we did hear a lot of concerns about security lighting. So that's supposed to be programmable by a motion sensor device, except for required by building code. No floodlights, no those really kind of bright lights that would just spill off and not point towards the particular source. Motion activated lights are still limited to 100 watts. We've also included standards for service stations. So areas would have recessed lighting, so not exposed or incorporated into that portion of the regulations. There are critical areas of illumination. We have this already in parking areas and in commercial zones. Essentially, the building code wants to make sure that critical areas, think sidewalks, 88 paths, even ATMs, need a certain threshold of light. So we've built that into the ordinance so that they can comply with the building code when necessary. So we do have a lot of prohibited lighting. So outdoor lighting that blinks, flashes, or rotates. Floodlights that project above the horizontal plane. So just think light bulb. It's supposed to be covered. You're not supposed to just see a light. That's really one of the big considerations of the dark sky ordinance or best practices. Lighting that unnecessarily illuminates any other lot or substantially interferes with the enjoyment of that lot. So don't spill your light into your neighbor's window or something like that. Point it down, point it towards your property. High intensity discharge lighting for recreation codes on private properties, so really bright lights and spotlights. We've also built in a number of exemptions for the ordinance. So lighting within the public right-of-way and public parks, permitted lighting for signs, which is taken care of through our sign ordinance, lighting to illuminate address signs. So fire gets to find you, police has to find you, want to make sure that light can be done. Temporary construction or emergency lighting. So it's temporary in nature. So the idea is that it's gone hopefully quickly. Short-term lighting authorized by a special events permit, again, short duration. Holiday seasonal lighting, so different holidays that occur during the fall, winter area. And again, kind of lighting but required by the building code or state law. So that's a consideration we kind of kept in the ordinance, is to allow the building code to, when necessary, kind of dictate terms. We don't want to be in foul of that or have a developer not be able to get their project because there's a conflict, excuse me, with that. So in terms of environmental review, we have a litany of exemptions. So section 15308 being adopted to ensure the maintenance, restoration, enhancements, or protection of the environment. 15301 regulations that would not result in any expansion of use. Section 15305 minor alterations and land use alterations that do not alter permitted uses or density. Section 15061B3 where the project can be seen with certainty that the proposed regulations will have no significant effect on the environment. And there's section 15300.2 that the project that this is a non-project. The sequence exception would not apply to the proposed ordinance. Ellen touched on the outreach that we did back in February. But in addition to that, we also did the required noticing, so legal ad, placed in the newspaper, displayed ad, posted on the city's official notice bulletin board, and posted on the city website. We also had a project website as well, Cupertino.org, Bird Safe Dark Sky. And so here's our recommended action. So, public hearing. Adopt a draft resolution recommending that the council find the actions exempt from CEQA and amend the code by adding a new chapter 19.102 and amending chapters 1908, 1912, 1940, and 1960, 1972 to adopt glazing and lighting regulations to implement bird safe and dark sky goals. So that's that part. If you have any questions for dark sky, I'm really happy to answer them.
Right. Thank you, Eric. Do commissioners have any clarifying questions for Eric?
Yes, hi, Chair Moore. Eric, a quick question for you is, what's the applicability of this? Is this for new again, retrofit, commercial?
Yeah.
Is it everything? It looks like you're trying to push a citywide.
Yeah, it would be citywide. And what we're looking for in terms of applicability is really geared towards new developments. But we also want to see when a new light fixture is being proposed or a new lighting system is being proposed that they're consistent with these requirements. But it really comes back to what we're looking for at the end of the day is that it's shielded, pointing downward, and not spilling to adjacent properties. That's kind of the big kind of mantra that I have for it is point downwards, don't spill over, shielded. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Commissioner Takahashi?
Yeah, you had mentioned a low voltage exemption. Is that just all residential low voltage or other specific elements of that?
It's low voltage, like 10 watts. So we were talking more of like landscape lighting, where you have low pathway lights would be really low. So that's really the exemption. If not necessarily a patio or porch light, that would still fall under this requirement.
Okay.
Kind of related to that. Oh, sorry. Yeah, related to that. Throughout the packet we got, there are references made to 100-watt light. You've just made reference to 10-watt, and those, a 100-watt LED bulb is quite bright. So I don't know whether there should probably be some wording, consider adding some wording that sets that as a incandescent light standard or, lumen standard for the lighting devices.
Yeah, so we can look into that. We looked at what was the common terminology in that, and we can confirm. I think the intent is, it sounds like that it's gone, or it's been understood as that it's to try to minimize brightness. But to your point, we can double check the LED impacts in terms of wattage.
I would just because LEDs are going to be common, I think that 100-watt incandescent, the brightness of 100-watt incandescent bulb is something that, people have a rough idea of what that is. I don't think 100-watt bulbs have been available for probably 10 years now, but, it's, at least for residential. But I think that just being clear on that. I also noticed there are many mentions of foot candles, which is kind of interesting. So I don't know whether, again, if that is the appropriate way in which code is expressed, then we should be consistent with that. Otherwise, consider doing that in. I think it's lux is the metric equivalent.
Yeah, because the 100-watt bulb incandescent, the LED equivalent is probably 26 watts. So
we can do incandescent equivalent or something like that, so that we can kind of add that.
That would help. There was also in attachment 6, PDF 47, you refer to foot lamberts, and I was reading that's rarely used. So you might want to find some different terminology on that. So PDF page 47 of attachment 6, it mentions 75-foot lamberts in 2 sections.
Yeah, we can
Lumens.
Lumens, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, when I looked it up, they said something else, like candela per square foot.
Yeah, the foot lamp is
Taking us back to some really bad physics problems here.
Yeah, we can look into that.
At least the power temperature is in Kelvin, so
I have a question about the 11 p.m. cutoff and what that actually is going to affect. And then my other concern was I wasn't real clear if you had a commercial building that had bright lights inside for security reasons perhaps, and it was spilling out. Was there any limitation on them having, the lights on all night for security reasons? So the first part was, what do you mean by the 11 p.m.? And then the second one was commercial light spill out. Spill over.
So when we were thinking about the 11 p.m. cutoff, it's kind of consistent with our business hours. So businesses are supposed to stop at that time. And the idea is, well, if you're not operating, your lights should be turned off, or you should have motion sensor lights that would illuminate whatever areas are being used. When that would stop, or let's say there's facility attendants that need to come in later, potentially a light can turn back on so that they can see the work outside or go inside the building. But we just didn't want someone that stops, closes up shop at 10 and then their entire facade is lit. All the exterior lighting is lit. That's what we're trying to prevent.
Okay, so this is just exterior lighting.
Correct.
Okay, and then because the ordinance covers the entire city, doesn't that also cover 11 o'clock for residents? So let's say I add on to the front of my house, I put in an exterior light, because I'm going to assume that my existing lights don't count. I'm going to do an addition, put an exterior light out front, and that light needs to be off at 11 or not?
Yes, that would be the intent. And the intent would be that light would be on a motion sensor. So if it did need to be on because you're going outside or you are outside, it would turn back on. If you're not there, it would turn off.
Okay, so I have an L-shaped house, and I'm going to add on to the front and have it all, flush across the front. I'm going to put an exterior light on the new portion. It needs to be off or on a motion sensor at 11, but my existing lights can stay exactly as they are. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I understand. Are there any other questions?
Chair Moore, I just wanted to point you to your prior question about indoor lighting and the spillage of indoor lighting, that is covered by the portion that's in the bird safe requirements. So this is one of the areas where there's overlap. So indoor lighting that spills out onto the front would also need to be off at 11 p.m. or within 2 hours after the business is closed.
But the ordinance covers all structures, so it would mean that a residential home, if the light spills out, and spills out means onto the neighbors at all, that my light needs to be off at 11 o'clock. Is that right?
If I may jump in, it also talks about window coverings, so you could use window coverings to kind of address that issue, as long as it's filtered by blinds or window coverings.
Okay, so if I add on a second story window, I need to make sure that the light spillage doesn't go on to the neighbors, and I would need to make sure I have window coverings to prevent that.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions?
Actually, this ties in a little bit with our earlier discussion around cost and feasibility, but I actually had that note down as a general one because I think that actually was more applicable in this section than it was in the bird safe section. There's a requirement here for motion sensing devices and timers. If I were just going to buy a cheap one for my home, it's not expensive. A commercial one might be. So, again, I would just, I would encourage you to look at, again, the kind of archetypal construction project, a commercial store or whatever, and try to just get a rough estimate, just so that people get a sense of what do you believe the incremental cost of the addition is. I would also say that there's an issue here about reconciling security lights with regular lighting as well, and that's something that it's touched on. And I think that in a lot of cases, security lighting, brighter security lighting, might be covered by state code or whatever. But I think that's something you would want to have be clear, maybe a little clearer in the statement here, just so that if I have a compliant house where the lights are generally off at 11 o'clock, but I have a motion detector which is intended as a security light, that's not going to be just 1 foot candle.
Right.
We also have an issue because people are working from home because we're still sheltering, and I have night owls in my 1-story home, but I imagine that there are two. If I were to add a second story, they're going to be in the second floor, and you're going to have light spillage. I just, any comments about that, that maybe you thought of as we got into the sheltering? Because you had the outreach in February before we had the shelter in place order. Did you have any thoughts about this?
If I may, for the 1-foot candle standard is only for outdoor lighting, not necessarily for indoor lighting. For indoor lighting, the standard is that it needs to be filtered by some sort of window covering, and that's it. So they're two separate things. The 1-foot candle standard does not apply to indoor lighting.
Okay, and what if I don't want to close my shades at night? Do I then get penalized some?
Friendly
I
code
don't believe
enforcement
that's
officer
in the
will show up.
code.
It's like the trash cans.
What if it's a large window and you're in a more secluded area and you don't have window coverings? You have to turn your light off at 11 o'clock. You can't have a light on.
That is not a standard that is
There's a lot
addressed
of
necessarily
overreach
by the
here.
draft.
You got a lot of overreach here, but I think there's an important issue around the security camera one, and that security lighting, not the camera, but the security lighting one. Given the rash of burglaries that we've been seeing, people stealing catalytic converters out of hybrises, people's being robbed in their homes. I mean, people want an element of safety, and I think there's something there with the lights that I think we're going to see some resistance from neighbors about making sure that they can have 50-watt, 35-watt security lights, be able to flash out on a motion sensor timer that's only available photovoltaic. Like, I think that's what people may want, and that may be something that becomes an issue.
Yeah, and we do have a provision for security lighting, so we allow for it. It can go up to 100 watts, but not past 100 watts. So we do have that provision built in, and whenever you have to have programmable continuous lighting, maybe for like an ATM, like ATM's like the kind of thing.
But what about, and we don't have these, Erica, but what about like an auto dealership where part of the allure is the fact that they light the inside of the showroom so you can see it as you're driving by, or some stores that normally if you had something, if you're sitting on Rodeo Drive, or, they want to see the display, right? Would that be banned in this kind of lighting scenario?
That would go back to the indoor lighting, where the intent would be for it to turn off at night. So at 11, that would turn off.
Okay, so we're looking at having some potentially, large developments come in that you're saying that the ground floor retail or dining components would need to be lights off at 11?
Yeah, or activated by, this is for outdoor lighting. And
Outdoor.
For outdoor lighting.
Outdoor versus indoor,
yeah. So outdoor lighting, what we're looking at is it's off at 11, or it goes into kind of motion sensor lighting in appropriate areas. So if you have to light a walkway, that's going to be lit appropriately for the building code. But if it's no one's there meant to be, not being used, then it would be to turn it off.
So this is going to get like the freezer section in the grocery store is what you're saying, how they're lighting them with motion lighting as you go through. Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
It also, if the restaurant or business has a use permit to operate past 11 p.m., those regulations would kind of those lighting restrictions would kind of carry over with that use permit.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's an interesting comment. I would actually, so one of my comments for deliberation later was really to say, perhaps we need to consider the specific time that the lighting be suppressed, have that run connected to the zoning, zoning and conditional use. I think, it's not even the example of big projects that come in the future. I mean, Main Street today, it would be unusual, I think, to say, hey, we want to, particularly since it's a P development where it doesn't have, it's not really outward facing. And Main Street in particular is not outward facing. That they ought to, whether there's such a tight restriction on the interior lighting or exterior lighting at 11 p.m. seems overly restrictive.
Commissioner Fung, you've brought up something really interesting when you mentioned Main Street, because they have the trees lit, the white lights on the trees. The Marriott has a panel lit section. It goes very, 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 very high. And then there is the decorative lighting on the Tantau, Stevens Creek Boulevard. There's LED lightings on the poles, that would be art, so that would have an exception. Yeah, it's a really bright complex, and I would think, well, maybe Eric, you could mention knowing what goes on, light-wise at Main Street, what wouldn't be allowed with this new with the ordinance.
Yeah, so it's difficult to say because I haven't been to Main Street at night in quite some time. So it's hard, but I think one of the things we're looking at would potentially be the tree lighting. That would be something that wouldn't necessarily be allowed because it's exposed. It's on year round. It's not seasonal. If they had those during the season, during a certain holiday between October and January, I believe, then that would be okay. The idea too would be, again, I can't recall the lighting, but it would be meant to kind of make sure that it's adequate lighting for that area use. That's kind of the underlying principle. But again, I can't speak specifics because I looked up pictures of Main Street at night to kind of hopefully put in the slides. I couldn't find any, but I did see the tree lighting. That was something that I realized wouldn't be allowed.
Okay. Well, there is on the west side of the Marriott, there are white translucent panels going up the side of the building very, very high, and they're backlit with white light. So it's like having a large outdoor light fixture that goes up the wall. Similar to like a ceiling light in an office building where you've got a whole panel where you've got a drop ceiling and it's lit like that. And it's up very high. So I'm wondering if that would still be allowed under dark skies. It wouldn't be a bird issue. Well, it could be considered a bird issue for disturbing them, but it's more of a.
Yeah, we could potentially, I think it can be considered accent lighting, which we could potentially allow or not allow. It could be lighting for an architectural feature, that kind of thing. You can provide us clarity as to I'm not sure if it's something you want or don't want, but we can look at that and create some language to be more clear.
Okay,
and so point. I'm sorry. Eric, would it be okay what about parking lights at Main Street, parking garage? Right, so they're on all the time, and the parking lights are also on. Are there safety, security? Are they under that, or would they be something different?
There are lighting requirements in the building code for parking structures, and again, it kind of goes back to going to the car, the pathways. Part of that would be technically in indoor lighting because it is a structure and everything close. What the ordinance would more deal with would be on top. So kind of those lights on the top of the parking structure would need to be examined to ensure consistency with the requirements.
Thank you.
And I have also a quick question regarding the 3000 Kelvin and the color of the light. And this is for somebody who knows light better than I do, because I had come up with a suggestion. There was a rainbow crosswalk issue, and I was thinking, well, why don't we do something with light? And can you think of anything that would preclude having rainbow LED lights? Is that because they're different colors? I'm just wondering if the
well, as proposed, yes, it would. The idea would to be have lights less than that. I mean, you could have like a soft, like the 3000 Kelvin, which is kind of a yellowish white, and then the 1000, which is more amber. If it was something for like a rainbow sidewalk, that could be an art feature, and that could be done through that. It can be reviewed through that.
And I got a question too. There's that bridge that connects. I'm not sure what I think it's the bridge that connects on Tantau over the overpass in Tantau on 280. Like when you're driving through that, you get that weird effect that light just hit you. Like, you ever see that? Like in the middle of the night, you're driving through and it's like, whoa, where'd that light come from? And then you pass by. I'm surprised no one's ever been hit because of that. So would an outdoor light, like for that, this kind of an accent light be covered on that? Would we just shut that down at night?
Well, so we did exempt lights in the public right away. And with that bridge, I believe it's Caltrans, they're very finicky with what goes over on or near their bridges. But they have to meet very specific standards. And now we go back to the building code or the Department of Transportation, whatever code Caltrans uses to make sure that those requirements are being met. There's a lot of studies that people look at lights and glare, even going in and out of tunnels, and how you're supposed to go in and what's that supposed to look like. So there's a lot of regulations for that are in place.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I guess one more. In comparison to other cities' requirements, specifically on indoor lighting spilling outdoor, are there precedents that other cities have either applied or learned from, or maybe adopted and then had to backpedal because it would be almost impossible and very challenging to enforce?
We could look into that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like if there could be some lessons learned that we could avoid a step of pain, which I think is always a good thing.
If I could comment related to that, the peer cities that were covered in the comparison, many of those are cities that don't have, you would not think of as commercial, Montessorino or Los Altos Hills. So I think that they're, again, it's not a barrier to us having this discussion tonight, but I would consider perhaps looking beyond the sphere of the sites that were looked at to look at places that probably would be more of a peer to Cupertino.
So Commissioner Fung, do you have some suggested cities you'd like to look at?
You could look at some of the local ones, Santa Clara.
Campbell.
San Jose was actually an interesting one because they have a dark sky. They have dark sky regulations there. So I just think it's the particular case of if you turn the lights off at 11 at in Montessorino or Woodside, that's a very different thing than Cupertino.
Right. I mean, the environment is completely different in terms of those cities do not use street lighting at all.
Yeah.
Right. Versus Cupertino has street lighting. And so it is a different comparison.
Definitely. And when you mentioned Santa Clara, the first thing that comes to mind is that you can see Levi's Stadium. When it's on, you can see it from Rancho San Antonio. It's really bright. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what their dark sky policy is.
Would this actually, good question related to stadiums and stuff, would that also include the Cupertino High School? Because they're out there doing band stuff till like midnight sometimes.
The state facilities would be exempt. They follow their own rules. But if the Flames want a stadium in Cupertino, they would have to follow.
Okay.
So you could potentially have residents around Cupertino High School, every time, they added on or changed their structure, needed a permit, they're going to have to do the dark skies and the bird safe design. However, they're next to a facility which is very bright and not following any of that. Is that correct?
That's correct, but there are already provisions in the California Energy Code that kind of goes towards that. They will lighting if it's not pointing somewhere that's being wasted. It's not as efficient. So there are provisions already in the building code about kind of pointing lighting downward and the appropriate area.
Is there?
This actually came. Oh, sorry.
Oh, Commissioner Fung, please go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say this. There were projects over the last 10 years that added nighttime lighting at the high schools, the FUHSD high schools. They are subject to state laws. They don't get a permit or review from the city. They do actually have the same kind of issues around, the ways that lighting works. They actually look at the new designs in FUHSD, look at bird safe design as well. So it may be slightly different rules. Obviously, if you can't, I think if you have a tennis court, you can't have nighttime lighting under this rule, a residential, if you had a personal tennis court. So that, things are not completely 100% specific, but it is that, well-regulated case.
For the extreme version of this regulation, for example, if we were to say any building above over 30 some feet that was proposed, 35 feet would be exempt, then yes, they'd be fine.
There was a kind of crazy EIR effort looking at what was going to happen with the golf course, with the Blackberry Farm golf course in the future. And one of the discussions there had been a lighted soccer facility or that kind of thing. And so this is something now that's a city project, as opposed to a state government project. That would probably, that kind of thing, the idea of having a lighted play field, that might not be something that would be possible under this, under these rules, or without, having to seek some sort of exemption. And perhaps that's just the way it should be.
I'm going to step back a bit and have some general thoughts. I think in general, whenever we're passing a new regulation, we have to understand the impact. I think in many cases, the impact, like for birds and so on, is good, but we also have to understand the impact on the process, on the costs, and how much would it take to comply with it, and whether it's even possible to comply it within the resources of the city. I think that should be in general a template we follow for any new regulations, so that we understand the impact on all the parties before we commit to something. And I think what Commissioner Fung did of asking how Main Street would be affected is a great example, because we can pick a few things here and there and have some of these before and after things, which make it sync that how will things be different. And that will truly help us understand the implications and then strike that balance between what the ideal world should be and what the real world constraints lead us to follow. So that would be my general advice. Like when we're talking about the glass, I had no idea whether it's going to be costing 10% more or 50% more or 100% more. And I'm in general very uncomfortable approving something like that, even though it's for a good cause, because we are in some way not looking at the consequences of that. So that would be my general broad guideline. I don't know if other commissioners have any thoughts to add to that.
Well, if there are no further clarifying questions, I think we can open it up for public comment.
If I could ask one more. This one actually I would direct to the city attorney's office. I'm curious, has this been analyzed for SB 330 impact? If you were to be building the senior housing project that has been built, or something like what's been proposed at Westport, those would be projects, housing projects which are covered by SB 330. These clearly would add incremental cost. Whether there's some question as to what that increment is. I'm just curious if there's any comment on that.
Yeah, sure. It's certainly something that I thought about when looking at this. I think a belief is that the costs are small and would not lead to a decrease in density, but certainly having further clarity around the potential incremental costs would help support that determination.
Related to that, may I ask a question to Deputy City Attorney as well? Sarah, would these laws be applicable to the project at Valco as well? Or would these be seen as retro?
These laws in general do not have a retroactive effect. It's only for projects that are coming forward for new permitting.
Okay, so the biggest potential community that we have would not have to follow these regulations that's being built.
They have to follow the regulations that were in place.
Were in place when they were permitted, yeah.
When they were permitted. Okay, it's good to know.
Is that true for we had some green building code issues that passed through, and it was my understanding that those needed to be followed when they pulled the permit. Is that true or not?
Yeah, so this applies when you pull a building permit, and I don't know off the top of my head whether those green building standards that you're referring to or these could potentially apply to previously permitted projects that still need to come in and pull building permits. I don't have an answer to that, unfortunately, right now, because it depends on how those projects were approved and what sort of approvals they locked into place at that point in time. It's a project by project determination. Okay.
And that's kind of interesting because, we were talking about the bird strikes happening between 0 and 50 feet. And then you're looking at a taller structure and where does it make sense? Okay, so are there any further clarifying questions? I'm going to open it up to public comment. Okay, I'm going to go to public comment. I see 3 people with their hands raised. And the first is Rose. Hello, Rose, are you there?
I am.
Okay, I'm going to start the timer. Welcome, Rose. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to, first of all, thank the city staff for the clarity of their presentations. And it's been very interesting to hear the questions and the discussion from the Planning Commission. It's been very thoughtful, and I didn't expect to learn a lot, but I've learned a lot from following your conversations. I participated in one of the city staff-led meetings. I think it must have been the one in February, because that was like one of the last times I was out of the house, probably. Yeah, and in general, I just want to support the city staff recommendations. I was impressed at the time during the meeting that the staff were very complete in their presentation. It was very clear. I thought the public engagement went very well. In my experience, it was a series of tables, and we were all asked to have individual discussions around the table. So I thought they did a good job of collecting public input, and I support their recommendations for both the bird safe and the dark skies. And that's really all I wanted to say. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Rose. And our next speaker, this is Shani Kleinhaus. Shani, are you there?
Good evening.
Welcome, Shani. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Shani Kleinhaus. I'm the environmental advocate for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I used to work at McClellan Ranch. Now I work at home. So I really wanted to thank staff. They did a fabulous job of analyzing other cities, how Cupertino can really lead this region in going a little bit further. I also understand, so I support the staff recommendation for both bird safe design citywide and the lighting recommendations. I did want to say that you asked a lot of good questions, and some of them can be probably addressed by a few little changes, and I'm happy to talk to staff or to you about what could be little changes that can make it a lot more palatable to residents per your concerns. But I also wanted you to remember that about 1 billion birds a year die because of collisions. And the collisions are not just because of the amount of glass, but also the light. There is a codependence in that. So addressing those issues really preserves the quality of life of Cupertino, the bird song of Cupertino. And people really care, and they talked about it a lot to us. We have a lot of members in Cupertino at Audubon, and also to at the meetings. And so hopefully you will accept the staff recommendations and potentially look at some small modifications if needed. Another exemption here, maybe lights can go off a little later than 11, things like that. But overall, I think the recommendations and the analysis they did is good. If New York City can have these kind of recommendations and a law for bird safe design that applies to all buildings, including housing, I think Cupertino can too. And when you look at modifications, which was one of the concerns, perhaps you can look at any modification that is in line with what the house already looks like, it's okay. But if you're going to do something very different, then you have to apply bird safe design. So maybe there is a way to resolve that so that the aesthetics of somebody's home don't look kind of a hybrid. But also one of our biggest concerns is the type of aquarium houses that people like to build in the hills right now, and those are really, really dangerous for birds. So I think that like I said, small modifications can go a long way. And I encourage you to choose the citywide bird safe design and dark sky ordinance. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Shani. And next we have Connie Cunningham.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Chair and Planning Commissioners. I wanted to thank Ellen and Eric Serrano for their excellent report that is going to protect our environment. Since that is the point of both of these regulations, I think it is important for the city to make clear that the environment is important. That is the key point. And making some changes to make that more palatable to residents is a good thing. However, keeping in mind the overarching leadership for the environment is important. In regards to bird safe design, I would call on you to join with many bird and human lovers to support the staff recommendation for citywide guidelines for bird safe design. Birds live in our neighborhoods, sharing our trees and bushes as places to live. It is not far from one of our bushes to running into one of our windows. There are many ways to protect birds from smaller structures. Although it may seem that smaller structures are not a big problem, it is the sheer number of smaller structures that make them a problem. It takes awareness of this problem to help people realize that they can help care for some of the smallest living creatures among us. Your support will go a long way to educating all residents of the role we play in the long-term health of our environment and saving birds who bring us the thrill of flight, life, and color in small packages. And then moving on to part 2, dark sky, I join with many bird lovers and those who know that light pollution is affecting the health of humans too, to urge you to support the staff recommendations for dark sky lighting requirements. In the future, I hope that the city will look into strengthening its color temperature limit from 3,000 to 2,700 Kelvin. My husband and I recently visited Lassen National Park, and the difference in the night sky there with ours is readily apparent. It would be sad indeed if the app called Skyview became the only way that people will see stars and the Milky Way galaxy in the future. I think it is critically important that the city show leadership and to show residents the way forward to the future. Please do support bird safe design and dark sky recommendations that the staff put together for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. And next we have Dashiell Leeds. Dashiell, are you there?
I am, yes. Can you hear me? Okay,
yes.
Cool. Hello, my name is Dashiell Leeds. I've been supporting these ordinances for a while, first as a volunteer for the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, but I now represent the Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter, and we are in full support of the staff recommendations. So thank you to the Planning Commission for hearing this tonight, and especially to city staff, Ellen, Eric, and the other city staff who have spoken and are in attendance tonight. I just want to set one fact forward for context here. There was a 2019 study in the academic journal Science, which found that since 1970 in North America, we've lost 29% of our bird species. And that's 29% in bird population. So we're talking a decline of billions of birds in just decades. So the risk is dire, and I think there is a need for widespread action that Cupertino, I think, can play a role in. Bird strikes are incredibly common. Whenever I talk to people and I ask them about it, they have their own stories about bird strikes and how they can hear them. And I think when we really stop to think about it, and when we talk with people around us, it really paints the picture of how often birds are colliding with our structures. I think the staff recommendations present a really flexible and adaptable way to protect birds in our area. I also hear a lot of complaints about light spillage, particularly at night. And this is not only a public nuisance, but it also affects the natural circadian rhythms of all living beings, including humans, which can lead to health problems in humans as well. I think there's a lot of really strong precedent for this action. The entire nation state of France has adopted a dark sky ordinance essentially as nationwide code. And Germany is actually considering a light pollution law as well. So I think that if entire nation states one has already done it and another one is strongly considering this, I think that Cupertino can definitely do this as well. I also want to touch really quickly on the subject of public safety. There have been numerous studies on public safety that have found that the presence of artificial light at night actually has no statistical impact on public safety. So while there may be the perception of that, in reality, the facts do not bear the case. And that being said, I think that the current staff recommendation has allowances for public safety as well to alleviate the concerns. So overall, I think this is an awesome set of recommendations. The Loma Prieta chapter is in strong support, and we hope you move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dashel. And next we have Lisa Warren. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. So I had to come and go, and so I have scribbled notes, and I may have missed some things that you guys said, but I did hear both presentations, and I too am in support of the rest city's recommendations, the strictest of them. Just a couple things I did hear. I want to clarify, maybe you can clarify somebody, but the question about Valco having to follow this or any already begun project, the key word is permits. They don't have permits yet. Hamptons doesn't have permits yet. So if the key word is permits, then yes, they do need to follow this, is how I would take that. And that goes for residential single-family homes as well. You start a permit, it's what's in place when you start your permit, not when you put in your application that you have to follow. So just, if that could be clarified, that would be great. And there's also a key thing you need to probably now, there's a difference between a remodel and a rebuild. A rebuild is not a complete tear down. A rebuild is in between a remodel and a complete tear down. And there's standards that have to be followed in building code, I believe, but city for sure. So, do you place every window and every light on the exterior of a home that's having a traditional remodel? Maybe not. If you're doing a rebuild, maybe yes. So maybe that detail has to be thrown in there. I'm worried that Eric, I think, mentioned something about the sign ordinance not having to follow this lighting, and I may have been wrong about that, but I'm really concerned about how signs are used. Main Street, I can tell you, if you live in the metropolitan and you have to look at Main Street out your windows with the Target sign blaring all night long, not so good. So, and that's just one example. Thankfully, their screening has grown a bit. Uh-oh, I'm running out of time. Okay. The height of automated control systems for lighting. The motion detector lights, and I live next to one in a house that's been occupied less than 2 years. Their lights are 10 feet high. They don't need to be 10 feet high to light the area that they're lighting. And when there's wind the plants blow, the lights go off, and we get light shows in our home. Not so great. So I think the height of lights has to be considered as well, along with brightness. And as far as costs, you build a new home, you build a rebuild.
Okay, please wrap up, Lisa.
Okay, you've got to do fire sprinklers, you've got to do underground utilities. I can tell you those are ongoing costs, they're expensive, and that's never been a question for anyone. You just have to pay it.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Okay, I'm seeing no further callers. Did we receive, Madam Clerk, any communications?
No, I don't see anything in our mailbox.
Okay, I do want to mention one set of emails that we received, and it was the one that during the previous presentation I mentioned it had a lot of attachments to it, but it was kind of interesting. They were requesting that we go from 3,000 and drop to the 2,700 Kelvin, and there was also a request for the maximum color temperature for areas with bats shall be 1,000 Kelvin, 1,600 Kelvin for rural areas, 2,200 for residential areas, 2,700 for business areas. In no case shall any outdoor light exceed 2,700. So there was a request to go even more restrictive. So we're at 3,000 if I recall correctly. Is that right? Okay, so we have closed the public comment. No, I do have one more. Someone has raised their hand. Deputy City Attorney, is it all right if I allow this person to talk?
I don't believe you closed the public comment officially, so I think you can.
Oh, good. Excellent. All right. So caller 2732, welcome.
Hello, this is Robert Hurt. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome, Robert.
Yeah, I'm a 26-year Cupertino resident. Just wanted to endorse the staff recommendations and thank them for such a great job, especially Ellen and Eric, and thank the Planning Commission for listening to it and having such great questions. There's always a way to get these things done, and anything that can be put forward at this point will be a plus point for the city. It'll be a plus point for the birds and for the residents, because if the birds survive, the people will thrive. And I just wanted to mention tonight, dark skies is appropriate. It's the beginning of the Perseid meteor shower. And if we had dark skies now, you could see them from your front yard. And since you gave me the gracious nod to go ahead and speak, I will close my comments off saying thanks to all the hard work that was done.
Right. Thank you, Robert. Okay, so I am seeing no further comments. We are closing the public comment period and we are bringing it back for deliberation. Do we have any comments from the planning commissioners?
I guess I'll start. I mean, look, I do think it's a very important thing. I think there's a lot of hard work that was done in terms of coming up with these comparisons, seeing what other cities have done, understanding what our needs are, looking at exceptions. I think the staff did a wonderful job doing that. And I think that's important. What I'm kind of torn, and I don't know if other commissioners are torn this way, is that we keep talking about the need for affordable housing, and we keep adding regulations, and every little one of them adds up to the costs, right? And then the other piece that I keep getting torn on is we keep losing our freedoms in terms of making choices, as if we want government to solve the problem with a regulation and force everybody to do something. And to some extent, I mean, all this wonderful hard work that was done to say, hey, look, here's a way to go save birds, here's a way things can do for people on their own, like, you know, would you like to be part of the movement, would probably be more effective in the long run than having people feel that every step of their lives is being trampled with another regulation. And that's the part I'm kind of torn by. So I'm trying to think of like, what is a good way in between to say, here's one way to move going forward. We should really advocate putting this on the website, getting people excited about it so they know about it. When someone goes out and builds a new building, that they know, hey, here's a way to design in a way to be much more environmentally conscious. We're not going to force it on you, but we want you to know what's going to happen or how you can build in a different way. And it's as if we've almost given up on the fact that there are good humans that would do that. And that we're kind of like saying, here's the rule. We want you to all do this, right? We're going to make everybody do it. And that just scares me a little bit, right? And I know it's our job to make those types of decisions. So I'm just trying to think about what might be a way to be a compromise out of it. And I saw the two options, right? Maybe it's something that we say, okay, fine. We take everything above 35 feet. We think about certain zones. We think about, certain like requirements, right? In terms of, public safety. Maybe it's only just new builds, right? I'm just trying to think of a way to just lessen that, that burden on people, but also find the balance that I think, the staff is, trying hard to show, because there's a lot of merit in it, but sometimes, maybe I'm just trusting of humans trying to do the right thing. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wong. Commissioner Fung.
So I had a couple comments. I think that, so I appreciate the information that was collected. And I think this is something long ago, I had actually brought this one up as a work plan item. This is probably 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm glad to see that it's coming around here. I think that one of the things that comes from this discussion very clearly is I think that to have a continued discussion on this, I don't think this is something that has to come back to us, but when it goes to council, I would really encourage prototypical examples to demonstrate what the cost would be. Something like 1,800 square foot house that's newly constructed, what would the cost be on a fourplex or a commercial shop? I think those kind of examples will help people get their mind around this. And I think that there is actually a very important issue that Commissioner Wong just touched on, which was really, we make many choices, and those choices can cause the cost of whether it's housing or anything else we build to be higher. So I think we do need to be very careful about that. Now, that said, I think that there was sufficient latitude in the bird safe regulations. So there are expensive things you can purchase fruited glass, which would be much more expensive than plain glass. Or, if there are ways to do this with exterior treatments or stickers, that's understanding what those are. There really are opportunities for that to be done in a pretty affordable way. So I actually would, with regard to the staff recommendation, I'm actually pretty supportive that we take I would personally like to see us take the most aggressive position, and particularly since bird strikes are mostly happening closer to the ground, it seems a little odd to exempt, the first 35 feet out of 50, or whether it's 20 feet or 35 feet. So I'd actually suggest that we take the more restrictive path there, with no height exemption. That would apply on new construction, on a complete remodel, and on landscaping work that you might do, but would be exempted for additions. Commissioner Takahashi spoke about this, and I completely agree with that. I think actually, if you were to be building an addition to your home, this is very similar in some respects to the way that we do ADUs. The sprinkler requirement is that if the main house had sprinklers, then the ADU requires it. If the main house didn't, then it wouldn't. So I think that although I would still encourage somebody who is making an addition to their house to consider good design, good practice in, from bird safe and lighting, that not necessarily be an automatic requirement. And then I think there probably also needs to be a discussion around commercial and whether that needs to have a sort of exemption. And I think that also, in particular, for those remodeling jobs, I think there really is a aesthetic consideration as well, and to not end up with this kind of mixed house. Dark skies is a little different situation there. I think that the costs would tend to be higher, and that the target point that I think that this recommendation was aiming at is pretty aggressive. So I would actually say that for a better dark skies policy, I would hope to see maybe a very clear statement about security lighting. Security lighting might be bright, but it needs to be something that's, intermittent, needs to be no more than a certain amount of time. Not an architectural feature of the building. You want to make sure that that's not precluded. I think that the recommendation as it sits, because it is universal across all zoning in town, is probably overly restrictive on commercial areas. So I would actually say that if there are time limits for night lighting, that should probably follow zoning in some way. That there probably should be a consideration for something like a Main Street, a P-zone development, where their internal requirements might be different than what would be, at large in the city. And then I think that the having maybe a little more formal SB 330 analysis is probably really important for projects like, like the all-BMR housing. I can't remember the name of the complex. For those sorts of projects, there is no profit being made there. So any additional cost really is will be cause for them to have to go out and seek additional funding. So I think we do need to be careful, and that may be nothing more than just to say, for projects which are under SB 330 regulations, that these don't apply. And I think that's my comments. Thanks.
Commissioner Fung, were you referring to veranda?
Yes, veranda, that's it.
Veranda, okay. Great. Commissioner Takahashi or Commissioner Saxena?
Yeah, I think first of all, as a resident and a citizen here, I'm glad that we're looking at these things. I think one thing which this whole shelter in place has shown is how much have humans encroached on nature. And we have seen pictures of animals entering neighborhoods like all over the world. I was talking to my mom in India last night, and she said that, suddenly the air is so nice and clean. I wish it was so nice, even otherwise. So there is something to be said of taking care of the environment, and it's there. My concerns primarily here are that we don't know what this means when it comes to the cost of construction, the cost for permits, the cost for compliance, the cost for enforcement. And to me, that is sort of an area which causes discomfort, because I would like to know, how much it will affect. And like Commissioner Fung was mentioning, that if we have a BMR project or some other codes, then we should order something which is not for nonprofit, they should possibly be exempt. But it also brings the question here is the cost so high that we really truly need to exempt those? And what exactly is the cost here? And what exactly is the issue here? So I would probably want to get more information about that before we approve, because I think once we have that information, and if it is just like a 10% increase in the cost of windows, we probably don't even need to make exceptions, because it's not, windows are probably 10% of the building cost. A 10% increases by 1%, we can probably live with that. But if it is more than that, if it is going to affect build or no build decisions, or it will have an impact on requiring additional financing or affecting the viability of projects, then we really need to look at it. But right now we don't have that information, and it becomes hard for us to make a call on that. So that would be my recommendation. I think one of the speakers earlier had mentioned that some countries in Europe, France and Germany, are considering these standards as nationwide building standards, which hopefully makes me believe that these are getting standardized, and the builders and the product people who make the architectural products or the windows will start supporting this as another line item, so that the cost will come down to something which is affordable, rather than somebody designing a custom thing for every project or something like that. So I'm optimistic that that's the path we are going, and I will be supportive of encouraging those, and even maybe talking to the companies who make those materials to standardize and so on. But without that information, I feel very uncomfortable approving something like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Saxena. Commissioner Takahashi?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely generally support these efforts for the city to make progress in environmental areas and do what we can to, essentially reduce our footprint. But I think there's still a lot of loose ends, and with regard to compliance and enforcement and the dreaded unintended consequences. And it seems to me that we do need to kind of think through some of these scenarios a little more in terms of what are we and how have others dealt with these scenarios of existing homes that appear to be non-compliant. Is it similar to a fence where you're counting on a neighbor to call code enforcement and you send code enforcement out there and then the resident says, oh, I had no idea that these laws were changed. So impact on existing structures, I think, is something that needs to really be seriously considered in more detail. There's also the trade between safety and dark sky. And this one, actually, I have a experience. My company, it's in San Jose, but we do have swing shift employees, as well as some employees that are in the day that arrive at 3:30 in the morning. It's crazy. But we had very dim lighting in the parking lot, and we've had 3 robberies. 2 of them were armed robberies. And so we immediately worked with the city to improve, i.e. increase our lighting in that situation. And so we do need to understand what the situation is with the business and if there are risks associated with safety that need to be assessed. Because again, if City of San Jose said, no, you can't do that, it would be a liability and a real, true liability. So that's just another element that I think needs thought and consideration. But it's a complicated element. I mean, it's easy to say, let's just do this. But again, I think we've got to think about the scenarios and how things are going to be enforced. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner Takahashi. Commissioner Wong, I didn't really hear a position on this. Did you want to add some more comments?
I'm just trying to understand process-wise is if we ask staff to go back and explore these options, does it go to council, or is it our recommendation to do that so that we have something more complete? Would that be possible, and what the implications would be? Or is this something that we just vote on at this point in time? Like, do we have the option to actually say, hey, let's go get a cost-benefit analysis and address some of the concerns that Commissioner Takahashi and Commissioner Saxena have? So I'm just wondering process-wise.
Okay, so I have a little bit of information for you, Commissioner Wong. If we feel that we have inadequate information, I'll just read this. It's not uncommon that issues are raised at public hearing or the commission has questions that are not addressed in the staff report, and the commission may want more information before acting on the project. The usual option for the commission in this situation is to reopen the public hearing and continue the matter to a date certain when that information can be provided. So perhaps the Deputy City Attorney would like to give us some advice if we think that the amount of information or we're wanting to see more information, something different, what can we do?
Yeah, certainly. If the commission feels it's unable to reach a decision based on the information available in front of the commission tonight, that the process that you just outlined, Chair Moore, would be the process to follow. I would recommend continuing it to a date certain. We have to confer about what that date would be. I'm not sure about the workflow. But I mean, the other option here, I believe that Commissioner Fung mentioned a desire to vote on this, but to request that additional information be provided to the city council in advance of its deliberations on this item, and that's another route that the commission could take. But if you feel like you can't reach a decision here tonight, then a continuance would be appropriate.
Okay, so Commissioner Fung, you were wanting to go with the resolution as the most restrictive resolution, which was the ordinance as presented, and not the 20 or 35 foot alternatives. Is that correct?
I was in favor of the most restrictive in terms of the height element of it. However, I don't think that should apply to remodeling or additions. So that's actually a little bit different than what was in the report.
All right, so you favor an amended resolution to exempt, was that new additions, is that correct?
Yeah, additions, yeah, effectively additions. I would actually, and just to be clear, I would actually probably recommend that we would, if you had an existing house which was not in compliance with the, it's not built in compliance with the bird safe rule or the dark sky rules, that those rules would not apply on your addition. So that's different than saying that the addition would have to incorporate these new features.
Would that be like a grandfathering the previous grandfathering homes that do not qualify, including additions and remodels?
But with the understanding, people are going to, it's just like the distinction about, people will tear down everything but their chimney, and that's a remodel, not a reconstruction. That's probably not in the spirit, but I think that generally in most of these cases, the kind of thing you're seeing here is somebody decides to add another room or another floor to their house. It would be odd to add a second floor and have to have the windows look different than they do on the first floor. As required by the city.
But if I'm understanding correctly, if we're going to exempt new additions, and this is just in single family residential or all residential, or where does this end?
I would do it on all, actually.
The whole city, all new additions.
Yes, I mean, it needs to be clear what is an addition versus a reconstruction, a redevelopment.
Yeah, I was concerned about that too. What's the definition of complete? It needs to be a complete remodel to trigger it right now? And what is complete?
There's probably a standard for that today. When you remodel your home, some amount of it, whether it's a structural element, perhaps Ben can comment on this, whether it's a structural element or a certain percentage of the original has to remain for the kind of permit that you're trying to qualify for. It would follow that kind of rule.
So what would trigger it then?
Yeah, so if if the rule says if you are doing remodeling and 80% of your house changes, that's not remodeling anymore, then it would be that kind of a rule.
Okay.
But I think that when people add a room to their house, when I look at homes in my area where people have added a room to the house, you're talking about a probably 20 or 25% addition. So that would be in that case something that I would by default say, that would be completely exempt from the new rules.
Is another way of saying that, like, apply the rule to only new projects and exempting remodels and additions? Would that be clearer?
I think that's a reasonable thing. I actually wanted to comment on something that Commissioner Wong had also said that I would agree with. One of the things, we understand that there's a wide variety of things you can do. We need not legislate them all. That doesn't mean we don't advocate for them. And I think what we really want to make sure we do is we don't prevent people from doing things that would be, more aggressive than what our standards. This is very much like the REACH codes, where we may not require 100% electric, but we don't preclude you from doing that if you chose to do so, at an additional cost. So it's very much in that same kind of model.
Chair Moore, can I ask a question of Commissioner Fung?
Absolutely.
Commissioner Fung, would you want to split the lighting from the glass from the dark skies portion? It sounds like you're heading in that direction.
My personal feeling was that I felt like, I think that what's involved in bird safe was a little more, it falls closer to the norm for construction. So by virtue of the fact it was not stretching the boundary as much, that it is more complete. I think it's more complete at this time, that there are a number of issues related to the dark sky, which in particular, I think the split between residential and commercial. I don't actually think the dark sky recommendations I don't think they're way off on residential areas, but commercial areas, it's probably a bit onerous for them to try to, have an 11 o'clock restriction, for instance.
I'm going to say something funny. I actually think the opposite for you, for the commercial versus the residential on the dark sky piece. But I'd be interested in actually breaking up the glass piece for the bird safe and leaving on new projects. So just in case people want to move in that direction.
I would personally like to hear some expert opinion on this, because if you think about the area perhaps around Levi's Stadium and what impact do you have if you're requiring everything around that to be dim? What effect do you have? Did you really improve the situation by doing that? And so, for Cupertino, it's possible that you're going to have densification all along Stevens Creek Boulevard. It's going to be very, very bright. You might also have that along De Anza and be very, very bright there. And then are we requiring that the residential areas, where the housing bills are looking right now, they can become quite a bit denser as well? I'm just kind of curious what our final impact, what we're trying to do, what's our goal at the end, because if it seemed to me that the goal was to make the lighting dimmer across the entire city and quiet down all of the lighting rather than having these pockets that are maybe separated a little bit. So, that's my question, is what are we finally trying to get towards? I was raised in Vermont. I think we mentioned this, that they have a dark sky policy in the metropolitan area and around Burlington, and it is quite dark, and you can see the stars, and it's wonderful. And I don't think we can get to that point here, especially if our neighboring cities aren't cooperating. But it would be great if we made some steps towards that direction. However, I'm a little concerned about how we're going to amend this current ordinance with all of these different ideas that we're coming up with. And my other concerns are, did we have enough outreach for the commercial portion? And do people really understand that, if you make an addition, perhaps you're going to have to make these changes? And I didn't really like, the example that I made of my own home, that I could have my garage area lit differently than the new part. That didn't seem to make any sense to me at all. And people should understand what the cost is going to be. And then, lastly, that the 20 to 50 feet space, or the 35 to 50 foot space, and leaving it kind of a free-for-all below there with the two alternatives. I'm concerned about that. If anyone has some comments or, some way to move forward. So even if we are going to ask for more information, what's the kind of information we need in order to come to, something that we all agree on? Or that's one side. And then the other side is, if we're going to send it to City Council, what form of the resolution can we amend that we agree upon to send to City Council? And then what's our list of asks that we want for extra information? And I'm pretty fine either way, but I see it as slightly complicated how to reach a resolution here.
I certainly agree. I think that Yeah, there's a bunch of things that are tough. I think that there has been a request here pretty universally around understanding the cost impact. I think it's actually, Commissioner Saxena has actually raised doing a cost benefit analysis. And I think that's actually going to be quite hard because what you're looking at are, you know, you're going to have to evaluate the value of a bird strike. And that's going to be, I think that's going to be hard to do. There's no question there's some dollars there. And I think that the other kind of question that Commissioner Saxena was asking, which is this a 1% incremental cost? Is it a 5% incremental cost? Is it 20%? That's something that I think that there's actually a good opportunity to have more of an answer. You know, what is the cost of fritted glass versus regular glass in a normal size new home? That's actually a fairly easy one to answer, and I think that you know, that may be there's a good point there. Now, from my personal standpoint, I believe we could pass a resolution. If we could agree on something, we could pass it and then hand that to the council, saying, hey, you know, we're mindful of that there's a cost issue, and we ask the staff to address that. But I also don't have a problem with, you know, if we want to kick it back and maybe specify just a few points that we want to have looked at, that would be fine with me as well.
So, and there was also a request, so we had a cost, and there was a request for a city comparison as well. And did we have any?
That one actually, this is the age-old question, you know, if you're looking for comparatives on what other places what other localities have done with regard to dark sky policy, and if most places haven't done anything, it's just, you know, trying to compare to Malibu is an odd, I mean, you know, it's not a meaningful comparison for us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say it's okay if other people haven't done anything. Doesn't mean we can't lead. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think I'd be on the side of, you know, getting some more information before we put this to council. But I'm curious to see what other people think.
Well, can you list what kind of information that you would like, Vice Chair Wong?
Yeah, I think, I think I'm the one I also asked for a cost benefit analysis, and I do realize that that's kind of hard to say. Hey, how much do you put? I mean, it's like trying to value the life of a human and payouts. How do you value the life of a bird, right? I mean, I don't think there's a lot of experts there on that. So, but at least what is the additional cost to building? What do you have to do from security regulations, automated systems, something like that? And I think that would help us figure out, do we do citywide? Do we narrow it down to, is it residential, is it commercial? Is it based on when you were built? Do we grandfather everything? Do we apply it to additions? Do we apply it to new builds? I think they'll help us like at least size that a little bit better, right? And it's not the end of, you know, of a program. It's, I mean, as it gets adopted, other people might say, hey, let's add other zones over time, right? So I think there's some of that. It's not like, you know, whatever we pass here is going to change over time. But what I really do want an encouragement is that we educate people when they come in for a permit, right? Or when they come in to build, that, you know, this would be an ideal standard for people to try to achieve. It's not forced on them at the moment. And it's something that they might want to be able to build to, and here are the benefits. And I think those are the same benefits I'm really asking. It's like, hey, this is the cost differential. Here's the benefit. It's kind of like when people buy Silicon Valley green energy versus PG&E. Like, I don't know, people do it for specific reasons. It's the same reason. Like, you're going to pay a penny more. Okay, are you okay with that? Sure, maybe. If I want to move in that green direction, maybe I don't like PG&E and I'll pay less, or maybe I like PG&E and I'm doing fine, right? But the point being is people at least see that and can make an informed decision.
There's actually some good precedents with, you know, so I cited the example around sprinklers in ADUs. I think the other example, the one that's probably more pertinent here, is that you know, when we had the discussion around REACH codes, there's not a requirement to have a heat pump water heater. It's actually something that you know, I think a lot of people would be interested in doing it if they knew about it. So it's exactly that thing where our role can be to educate. Our role can be to make it easier for you to do it if you want to try to make the leap. And that's distinct, but I think much more community friendly than saying, hey, you know, here's the requirement. Now your water heater is going to cost twice as much.
Commissioner Takahashi, did you have any comments? A wish list of information you would like to have?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I said. I think, so we talked a lot about security lights, intensity of security lights. There was a lot of discussions about the elements of intensity as well as the color, and where, you know, we had a recommendation that seemed to be kind of in the middle in that regard. But for commercial companies, you know, if they are manufacturing, are they multi-shift, and therefore are there considerations there that need to be adopted and incorporated? So that would be one. Another would be, this was really in terms of both, and compliance with regard to grandfathering versus global compliance and enforcement. So, you know, kind of how does that work, and what are the ramifications of that? So I think those are the biggest elements I have. So, and it applies to both. So, you know, with the windows and glass, I definitely feel like the remodel should be exempt. So I think those are my main elements.
Thank you. Commissioner Saxena, did you want to add some more?
Yeah, I think I echo what Commissioner Wong also said, Vice Chair Wong. We do need to get at least an estimate of the cost so that we can decide how far we want to apply this. I also wanted to get a better sense of the compliance challenges, especially with the light thing. And if there are cities which have already have them in place, maybe a staff could have a phone call on them and see, hey, what worked, what didn't work, and like what are the issues they faced in getting it to work, so that the actual implementation would be something we are comfortable signing up, because there's no point having an ordinance.
Commissioner Saxena, you cut out for a bit.
Specification I had for that stuff.
Okay, Commissioner Saxena, could you repeat your last sentence? You cut out. We still can't hear you. Okay, you've frozen. I'm going to start summarizing the list of wants that we have so far, and he's still frozen. So we have the cost benefit analysis and make a decision for how to apply. And I would just want to add a little note to that, is that, you know, we do have the COVID-19 issue, and some of our businesses are hurting, and when they perhaps want to take a loan out and remodel, and what kind of effect that we're having, are we going to hurt them? And so we need to be really mindful about that, and for homeowners as well, or somebody wanting to build an apartment building, something like that. And we also next have the city comparison, and then to reiterate, we're concerned about when to apply this ordinance, and we have what's the difference between commercial and residential, and I just added a note, you know, what is our philosophy of light calming between those districts? Do we want everything to have that light calming effect, or is commercial allowed to be brighter, that type of thing? And there was a question about if new additions would have this requirement or not, and then and would remodels trigger the ordinance? And finally, we've got security lights and consideration for corporations which might have multiple shifts. Are we going to grandfather in structures? What will enforcement look like? And again, we have the remodel. Okay, and then I had a question about, are any of the other cities doing the 20-foot or the 35-foot exemption? So that would be mine. And are there, did I summarize that?
I think you're missing one that you asked, which is really about when does this take into effect, when you pull the permit or when the project is announced or something like that. I think you left that open.
So what's a nice way to put that? When does it apply essentially? When does this ordinance apply? Is it
Activity.
Yeah, is it when the building permit is pulled or not? Okay.
If I could refine one, I think that because it sounds like we're going to send this back for some further review. If we were to do that, I would ask that we just maybe apply a lens that would differentiate residential versus commercial and new construction versus remodel or addition. That probably would make it clearer. I think that particularly around the dark sky policy, I think it's going to be hard for that not to have a differentiation between residential and commercial effect. And, Cupertino is probably 80% residential. So if it were something that was more restrictive on residential, you'll get much of the effect that we hope to get here. From a planning standpoint, yeah, there is that question about, I think one of the intentions from trying to plan well is that you do concentrate activity and light and those sorts of things into centralized zones so that they don't spread everywhere. And so I would just say I think that that's likely to be the direction which we go. And I think that trying to look in that light, whether it shows up in city legislation, existing city legislation, or otherwise, just to understand what are the appropriate things. I think actually very simple things. If the recommendation had come back that we follow the business hours of a business in terms of their exterior lighting, if we follow, that would be subject to conditional use permit if it were past 11 o'clock. That would be something in the future as we grant new conditional use permits. That will be consideration. Is this going to be an enormous light spill in the city? So I think that kind of thing may actually be a very simple, a simple refinement to what's been presented and probably work pretty well.
Thank you, Commissioner Funk. Vice Chair Wong?
I would actually agree with Commissioner Funk for different reasons about separating residential and commercial. I believe that the residential areas are usually darker out earlier than some of the commercial areas. And so the impact would actually be more on the commercial side, but that's okay. I think it still needs to be split. I think that's the point I want to make. I also believe that we may want to separate the two resolutions, split up the dark skies lighting portion with the dark skies glass portion and the building portion, and I think that might make it easier for council and if we were to once we send it over to them. So,
I'm sorry, Vice Chair, could you reiterate what you want to split up there? Did you mean bird safe and dark skies?
Sorry, bird safe and dark skies. I'm confusing those two. I'm just reading it here. So on the bird safe side, splitting it from the dark sky side, I think might help because I think we might end up applying them a little bit differently. Those staff probably put it together to make it easier for us. I think we're making it, I think there's enough nuance for it to be separated.
I was fine with it being together, but I agree it's a little bit confusing, but because of the way it's applied in the municipal code, I can understand why they did it that way. And I don't know that we want to make more work for them, dividing it back out again. Or is that a problem?
It's not a problem at all. I'm just thinking it might be easier given the way our discussion has unfolded too. So.
Okay. Would staff like to comment on that? Is that a great deal of work in order to parse those two back out, or?
And Ben, we can't hear you. Can I take that one?
Yes.
Okay. So with regard to splitting it up, it should not be too much work. We'll just present them as two different sections that kind of feed into the same chapter. If that's what the commission wishes to recommend. And then if the council ends up adopting one and not the other, we just make some, conforming changes to make sure that the section numbers are updated, et cetera.
I would add that whether we split or keep it together, as long as the commission is fairly clear on the requirements that you want us to modify per each item. For example, there's a lot of discussions and we're just talking sort of generally speaking, and kind of lump in both items together. That'd be a little more challenging. But if you're very clear about what you want to see if per each item, there shouldn't be a problem for us. It's just a preference for you if you want it together or separate.
And if I may, I had a clarifying question. I know there was a lot of discussion about remodels versus additions. One question in my mind was, you know, if somebody did a whole house window replacement, would the commission be interested in, you know, applying the bird safe standards in that case to that particular kind of project? So a little direction on that would also be helpful.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, I personally like the idea that if you did, you would be required, especially if somebody, you know, had an Eichler home like mine, and if it had the original windows that were single pane and not tempered going down to the floor. I personally would like to see that. I think it's worth it as a suggestion. But any other commissioners like that idea?
I would consider that a remodel and exempt, but you know, that's just how I would do it. But if I were going to put in new glass, right, I might as well do it, right? That's what I would do, but I wouldn't want to force everyone to do it, right? I mean, this is a weird thing. Like on one hand, I'm like, it'd be cool if we're like the only city to get this all done and out there. On the other hand, I'm like, you know, the more I talk to people, I feel like, you know, they just feel like we're encroaching on their lives every day. So I'm just like, all right, I get it, you know, so.
And if we're not requiring something under 20 feet to have to make these changes at all, then this wouldn't be included. These structures, it wouldn't matter. So I think we probably should have some direction, or you know, if we agree with exempting things under 20 or 35 feet at all.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like we all know the game, right? You tell me I got 20 windows, I'll replace 19 then, and I'll replace the other one some other time, right? You know, if they're not going to do it, they're still not going to do it, right? There's a way around it. It's you know, I don't know. That's why I'm saying, like, you know, I think the education part is super important, regardless of what we end up doing. Like maybe there's something we can say, like, let's make sure we advocate it and get it educated.
So we probably want to see those neighboring cities ordinances, what they've got, and how they're written with regards to the 20 or 35 feet. And may I ask, did any of the cities have those kinds of requirements or exemptions, I should say?
Ellen, do you want to respond to that as part of your research?
The exemptions to the additions, is that the question, Chairman?
It was around height.
Yes, so we had the
Yes,
two
height.
options. I'm sorry, I have a friend. So we have the two alternatives, which were, one was the 20 feet and one was the 35 feet to the actual ordinance. And I was wondering if that came from some surrounding city or where did that?
Almost done, I think.
Yeah, other cities that have height limitations, they also have property size differences as well. The height for 35 is sampled from Alameda. That's a city that's similar, I guess, in size to where we are, plus urban, like something like San Francisco. San Francisco also has regulations on the size of your addition as well. So that could be a consideration.
All right.
I guess what we're saying here is we're asking staff we're sending it back. We're not taking a vote, or do we have to vote on not taking it? How does it work? I'm curious.
We would we reopen the public hearing, continue the matter to a date certain, and when that information can be provided. So we are continuing and adjourning to when staff could provide the information, and we should probably, unless you got our list, we might want to reiterate our list and make sure that we're all on the same page.
Chairman, you have to, I believe you, and Deputy City Attorney can jump in here, but I believe you have to take a motion if you want to continue it to date certain. Okay. So I would say give us a little bit of time, and I hear that there's some significant concerns with the dark sky item. So that particular piece will I believe will probably take a little bit of time. The cost benefits analysis for bird safe, it's not going to be feasible to do that. I'll just say, the bird safe protection, depending on the design. If you're Frank Gehry, you want to design a nice piece of architecture, that could be really expensive. Or you can just buy a decal, $3 per 24 by 32 inch window. So we can certainly put that in a table and present that. So
I guess I'll make a motion. The motion is to continue the public hearing, go back to do some research, and then before we actually submit it to council. Is that the proper way to do that, Deputy City Clerk?
is there also a determination whether you want the item split or kept together?
I'd like to keep that split if that's possible. Is there a second?
I'll second it, although I think we can keep them together. I think we can keep them together. The issues that are being examined are clear enough. I think that we can maintain that the next time that we discuss this as a single hearing, where the output may be that it becomes two separate items when it goes to council.
I'm okay with that going forward. I just think given there are two different areas in the building, in the municipal code, the part of buildings and lighting, that's the only reason I wanted to separate, to keep it clean as well in the CMC.
Right. So I would like to just, one more time, I'm going to clarify the items that we're looking at. So your motion was that we would split up bird safe and dark skies. Is that correct in the motion?
Right now, no. I think the only motion on the table, and I agreed with Commissioner Fung, is that we would propose to go back and get some more research and leave the public hearing process open.
Okay, and split up bird safe and dark skies is not going to be discussed.
Don't touch that part yet. We'll do that if we have to when we come back to the meeting. If not, we'll take it as one.
Okay.
So I think we're actually continuing the item as it was agendized today with further direction to the staff.
So not date certain then?
Yeah, don't split them up yet. Don't split them up.
Not to a date.
No, not to a date certain.
And not to a date certain. That's up to you guys. So.
Yeah.
When staff has the information gathered.
When staff has the information gathered.
I mean, you had a tentative date for this to go to council, but I don't think this is time critical. So.
Well, it's only time critical in that it was in our previous fiscal year work program, and due to COVID-19, it's slight delay, so we'll just get delayed a little bit more.
Do we still have funding for that work plan?
It depends on how extensive you wish for the cost benefits analysis to be, but we'll do our best to maintain our budget, of course.
I mean, just we should vote on it, but I guess just from a direction around it, I think Commissioner Fung's right? You got a 1,400 square foot, typical Cupertino single-story home. You got a 2,500 square foot, two-story single home. You've got a two-story business, right, with like a facade and storefront on the bottom. I think it's like those types of scenarios.
I think in terms of windows, it would have to be a size of the window as opposed to square footage, because the same square footage, 1,500 square foot house may not have the same windows, right? You could have a window wall. So I think maybe the size of the window cost, that may be a little bit more realistic. Anyway, that's something we'll work out and bring back.
Actually, I think the goal here is it's not necessarily to design a house, but there's a sense here of the kind of applications you get when a 1,500 square foot house comes. It typically has a certain amount of window, and that actually I think is sufficient. It doesn't,
About 10 to 12. Yeah, it's about 10 to 12 windows. That's it.
I think that the number, I believe the number everyone's looking for is if you're going to build a house with the intention that you're going to sell it for $1.8 million, we're curious how much is the incremental cost of those windows?
I think that may be a little bit of speculation. I think that'd be a little bit of speculation. Depends on the builder, depends on the homeowner. There's different styles, different designs, different heights. Square footage could be split in 2 stories, single story, different window styles, wall types. I mean, that would be challenging.
Then simplify it, right? Just a baseline of this type of window without this regulation is this much. If we then impose this, it would be this much. I think that's really what we're looking for, is what is the delta as a percentage, so that we can really assess, that impact. Because I agree, there's an infinite number of combinations, and we're not asking you to analyze an infinite number of combinations. It's just, if I do a window replacement on a 1,500 square foot house right now, it's $10,000. With this requirement, it's $10,500. It's $20,000. That's what we're after, is what is that change? Because the benefit part is that is total speculation as well. So we're not, I don't think we should ask you for the benefit as much as, is there an incremental cost for glazing or not? And if it's in the noise, then we're saying, okay, the cost is not significant, and therefore we should definitely wholeheartedly move forward on all elements, because it's really in the noise from a cost perspective. I think that's what we're after.
We'll certainly do our best. I think one thing is we want to try to avoid the indication to the public that if you're to build a 1,500 square foot house, your window replacement will be X dollars, right? There's that expectation. But we'll do what we can. We'll balance out. I hear you. We'll balance out and bring something back to you.
But stylistically, you could have, if somebody had a traditional style home with muntins, they're already going to be complying when they change those out. They're not going to have.
Yeah, those went out of style about 20 years ago. Just so you know, nobody does that anymore.
We might have transoms, right? Yeah.
Go to New England. They're still there. But okay, and alternatively, somebody could use like a sticker or do-it-yourself type, stenciling and spray paint, with the glass. There's a product that you can do that with. So there are DIY inexpensive ways that people could get around it and save a good deal of money. I'm sure it might. Yeah. So
I guess maybe another way to frame it, I'll tell you, I'm gonna have a pretty large house. I don't have the slightest idea how much it would cost if I need to replace my windows. So it's interesting, it's not useful to talk about, is it incrementally, $4,000? So I think it's just getting a very rough sense of what you would normally expect. And then, to understand, the least, if there's an exterior covering solution, from that or this kind of sticker thing that we're talking about up to, if I wanted to get processed glass, I think that's the kind of information we're looking for.
I did like.
Sorry.
I did like Pugh's comment about, if there was a full house redo of the windows, and I'd like to think that, people will try not to be tricky about it and do 9 out of 10, but I would like to, personally, I'd like to see that triggered, or if they are going to be tricky, say, if you do more than 75% of the glazing per square footage on your house, that you have now triggered it, and try to change the way what triggers it a little bit, in case people are trying to be clever about that. If we're serious about having the bird safe design, then you want to capture as much as you can when there are changes made.
And then the last point is, have we talked to folks in the Chamber of Commerce as well to get their feedback and input, especially for the retailers? I think that's probably the piece that would help as well.
Both.
About the impact. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For both the dark sky and the
dark skies and the bird safe.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think it would be good to get their feedback as well.
Right. So if the philosophy is to concentrate light in the commercial area or not, it makes a big difference for the Chamber of Commerce members.
The chamber.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If I may just clarify that, in terms of parking lot lighting standards, we already have those. They do have to be directional right now. They do have to be shielded. They do have to meet certain illumination standards. I think the only piece, and I'm just trying to summarize what I'm hearing so that we can understand it better, is the concern is with regard to turning the lights off at 11 p.m. or
It is. I'll give you a great example.
Right, that's what you said.
The Hill T on Lori Plaza didn't always have its lights on, but once it got burglarized, it always left its lights on in the middle of the night.
Fair enough.
Right, and that's a great example. And then they moved out. I don't know why, but.
Okay. Yeah, and the sign ordinance does have some language about signage being turned off after 11 p.m. just as an FYI too. So we'll certainly take that and look into it.
So are you saying?
Can we vote?
that all signs in the city should be off after 11?
Yes.
Oh.
I
don't think they
that doesn't happen today. Maybe code enforcement doesn't work at night.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to
Which was part
enforce,
of the
and,
reason
you know,
why we kind of looked at the outdoor lighting to kind of coincide with that as well. But that's a different, scenario.
It might be simpler, back to what Commissioner Fung was saying, to tie the ordinance to the zoning. They'll save a lot of time.
We'll certainly look into that.
I think it actually would be great to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce. You kind of know what the answer is already. I mean, I don't think anybody will be looking for, restrictions on, to turn their lights off earlier or anything like that, I think there are opportunities to get input from them about, how do you scale this to have it make sense? There's certainly at 3 a.m., it's hard to justify anybody having extensive external lighting. It can be for security reasons, it might be for security reasons. Hopefully that would be intermittent. I mean, I think we can identify something, and I suspect that you really could get, even the Chamber of Commerce will agree to that.
Has anyone heard anything about with the, return to office, that there would be an increase in swing shifts in order to decrease the amount of contact people had? Yes.
Yeah, there actually is. I think there's two or three things going on with return to office. We've been helping clients with this, and one is really trying to stagger when people come in and stagger the shifts, trying to stagger the days they come in. That's the second thing, and also trying to limit the type of gatherings that are going on. And some are happening late at night, given the time zone differences as well. So we have seen people go in late at night for some meetings. I've had to go in late at night for some meetings.
Okay. Right. And I don't want the, the attendees to feel discouraged about our decision to continue. So going back, so we did have a motion. Did we have a second?
Yeah, I seconded it.
We just have a second. So do we feel comfortable to, yes?
I just would like clarification in the motion to continue to a date uncertain. I don't think that was part of the language.
Commissioner Vice Chair?
I think to a time where the staff feels ready to bring it back, I think is probably more appropriate.
All right. And then we have a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the vote?
Okay. I also have a friend. She won't be down.
Welcome.
Had a rough day. Okay. Vice Chair Wing?
Aye.
Commissioner Takahashi?
Aye.
Commissioner Saxena?
Aye.
Commissioner Fung?
Aye.
And Chair Moore?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We'll bring the item back at a date uncertain.
Great. So I want to, thank Eric and Ellen and our Deputy City Attorney and Ben and Pew for helping us through this. And it looks like we're going to be working on it some more. And that concludes our item 3. And we move on to old business, which we have none, or new business. Do we have any staff and commission reports?
No staff reports.
All right, any commission reports?
Yeah, I have a brief one. A month ago, I attended the mayor's meeting for commissioners. It's far enough back now that I don't think there's any reason to go through it in great depth. I think the major issue that had come up, one of them was our discussion around Westport, and the other was, which had been the night before, and the other was around the Parks and Recs Commission has been conducting an off-leash dog trial in Jollyman Park, and that has been extended for a year due to COVID. And that would be my report for the mayor's meeting.
Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Fung, it's been extended for a year, or it'll start in a year? Or
it's been operating, but it will extend for a year because the unusual circumstances, they can't really collect reasonable data at this time. So the intention is that they will continue to operate that on provisional basis for, I believe it was extended for 1 year into the summer of 2021.
Okay, all right, all right. Any other commissioners have a report?
I do. I was attending the SB 1120 and the SB 902 meetings today as they were going on in the Assembly, and had a chance to talk to a few folks about that earlier. So some interesting bills passing through legislation. As many people know, that usurp local land use control, designed for more housing. But I think it was interesting to see a good amount of opposition, which I've never seen in these kind of bills. So it's interesting to see all the different cities around the state getting together and actually, mayors, elected officials, other folks, stating their point. So I think there's some interesting conversations going on in Sacramento. That's it.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I was also on the line for both of those bills today, and it's certainly changing what our jobs will be like in the future. Are there any other commission reports? Okay, then with that, I call this meeting adjourned. Good night.
Good night.
Almost everything, but not our resolve. We've pulled together, worked hard to keep each other safe. We've flattened the curve and are starting to reopen our communities.